Chapter 447 The Key was Snatched. Chapter 447 The Key was Snatched. Updated by Novelful. Key. When they heard this word, both Ling Han and Yen Tian Zhao stopped fighting simultaneously. They subconsciously thought that this was referring to the secret key that could open up the Sagittarius Palace Hall. Indeed, the clan head of the Jiang clan immediately stood up, wearing an expression of shock and rage as he shouted, "How could that be possible? The key has been hidden so well. So how could someone have found it?" In reply to clan head, the man answered with fear and trepidation. That man used some kind of unknown secret technique to take control of Fourth Elder and had him personally take out the key, which he handed over to that man. Then the latter escaped in a coffin. Rong Huanxian. Ling Han was immediately certain that it was him. Though there were possibly other disciples of the Thousand Corpse sect in Extreme Yang City, the only man who would dare to so publicly appear as a disciple of the Thousand Corpse sect could only be Rong Huanxian. With the 3 lives corpse casket, he could be as willful as he liked. Without a word, Ling Han and Yen Tian Zhao both simply turned and left. With a few leaps, they had reached the highest point in the great arena. Their eyes swept over the surrounding area and soon saw where the commotion was. They then respectively used their motion techniques and moved to pursue. Since the key has been snatched, what point was there to continue participating in any marriage tournament? Xiu, Hu Niu, too, used her extreme speed and joined the pursuit. She shot a look at Yen Tian Zhao, opened her mouth slightly, and bared her snow-white teeth, seeming to be filled with battle spirit. A hint of dread actually appeared in Yen Tian Zhao's eyes, and he could not help but maintain a certain distance from Hu Niu. The Azura Demon Emperor could possess Rong Huanxian, and Yen Tian Zhao was also suspected to be taken over by a godlike being. So if Hu Niu, too, had a terrifying godly spirit in her, it didn't seem strange anymore. However, Ling Han was still extremely doubtful. Was there such a god that was violent, yet whose favorite activity was to eat and also play cute? The origin of the little girl's oddity was in her spirit base, and seemed to be completely different from Rong Huanxian and Yen Tian Zhao. What a headache! There were really too many monsters in this lifetime. Ling Han ignored it for the moment. The most important thing now was to cut Rong Huanxian off and snatch back the key. Thankfully, though the defenses of the 3 lives corpse casket were extremely impressive, it was not too overwhelmingly quick. At least the gap between Ling Han and Yen Tian Zhao and the casket was slowly decreasing. There was no need to mention Hu Niu with her terrifying speed. However, she did not go all out, and instead chose to stay by Ling Han's side. There was no shortage of the flower blossom tier elites in Extreme Yang City, and though Ling Han had not seen any before, he believed that there were also ultimate elite cultivators of the spiritual infant tier as well. Rong Huanxian dared to so boldly snatch away the key. How could they so calmly allow him to escape? But at least until this moment, no flower blossom tier cultivator had made a move yet. It was understandable. If they snatched back the key in Extreme Yang City, there was a high chance they could ultimately be pressured into returning the key to the Jiang clan. However, once it had left the city, that would considered to be in the wilderness. And if one obtained something in the wilderness that naturally belonged to him, and there was no such thing as a lost item, this was a hidden rule. Thus, everyone was waiting. They were all waiting for Rong Huanxian to leave the city, and at that time, it would definitely tempt a large number of elite cultivators into acting. Flower blossom tier, or even spiritual infant tier, cultivators making a move would not be strange. The 3 lives corpse casket cleared the way, and no one could stop it in its path. It just took about 10 over minutes, and Rong Huanxian exited the city. Instantly, multiple figures appeared, no longer enduring silently. "Be careful! This casket is a treasure of the Thousand Corpse sect and possesses extraordinary power," someone reminded. He was a flower blossom tear cultivator that had once appeared in the dark devil forest and personally witnessed how terrifying the 3 lives corpse casket could be. A considerable number of people nodded, but even more looked disdainful. Even if it was a level 10 spirit tool, how much power it could display would still depend on who the user was. Since you all are so cowardly, then I shall humbly receive this key. One of them made a move and delivered a palm strike in the direction of the 3 lives corpse casket. Idiot, a large number of people thought. Pah! A palm struck onto the 3 lives corpse casket, and instantly multiple patterns lit up on the lid of the casket that transformed into a floating army of skulls and shot out in the form of a spear at the man. The man was greatly shocked and hurriedly spread out his martial intent to form a layer of defense over his entire body. However, the spear simply pierced directly through his defenses. Pooh! It pierced through his head, and blood dripped from the tip of the spear. His luck was not as good as that flower blossom tear cultivator from the dark devil forest. He was killed with a direct pierce through the head. Pah! The army of skulls disappeared automatically, and when the body of the flower blossom tear cultivator lost its support, it instantly fell down from the skies and onto the ground, causing the layer of dirt on the ground to be disturbed. Ha 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 ha! You actually gifted me with the body of a flower blossom tear cultivator as material for my corpse soldier. Thanks. Rong Huan Xian's voice was heard from within the casket. The lid of the casket opened. An arm stretched out and quickly dragged the body of the flower blossom tear cultivator inside. Pung! The lid of the coffin quickly closed back up again. When they saw this scene, everyone was struck speechless. This casket was defying logic, so what could they do now? Looks like flower blossom tear cultivators were of no use, so the only other option was to have spiritual infant tear cultivators make a move. A powerful cultivator whose whole body was enshrouded in a purple-colored divine light appeared. An impressive aura emanated from him, and even spiritual pedestal tier cultivators were forced to their knees in front of him, without the slightest ability to resist. An elite cultivator of the spiritual infant tier. However, Ling Han, Hunyo, and Yen Tianzhao were no ordinary people, and were not the slightest bit afraid that they would be oppressed by this terrifying aura. Furthermore, Rong Huan Xian, being protected by the 3 lives corpse casket, was also unafraid. Moreover, this kind of aura was not invincible. As long as one was a ruler that had managed to form 7 flashes of qi, he would be qualified to resist and could decrease the effects this kind of aura had. It's Violet Point Elder. When they saw this powerful cultivator appear, all those flower blossom tier cultivators gasped in surprise, though they were all aware that this would draw the attention of spiritual infant tier cultivators. When such an ultimate elite cultivator appeared, it still caused much commotion. Indeed, even spiritual infant tier elite cultivators would be moved by the inheritance inside the 12 heaven mystery realms, though Violet Point Elder might not be qualified to enter into the mystery realm. He had a great many disciples and grand disciples. There definitely had to be 1 or 2 talented ones among them, and as long as they obtained the inheritance, wouldn't that be equivalent to the Violet Point Elder obtaining it as well? The Violet Point Elder's figure descended, and began to press a palm onto the 3 lives corpse casket. Ha ha ha! Stupid old man, are you here to seek death as well? Rong Huan Xian laughed loudly, appearing very arrogant and conceited. This caused everyone much displeasure. He was merely a minor character in the spiritual pedestal tier, and just because he had a level 10 spirit tool, he dared to undermine them. This was also because there was a shortage of ultimate elite cultivators in the North region. Otherwise, if he dared to try the same thing in the middle state, even with such a turtle shell-like defense, the only conclusion would be him being dragged out and killed. The Violet Point Elder pressed a palm onto the casket, and instantly the 3 lives corpse casket reacted. Another skull soldier appeared and slashed towards him. Pung, pung, pung. The both of them instantly broke out into a fierce battle. The Violet Point Elder was not at a disadvantage, but also did not manage to destroy the Skull Soldier, and a stalemate instantly ensued. But the Skull Soldier was only an attack formed by the 3 Lives Corpse Casket. Even if it was destroyed, the 3 Lives Corpse Casket needed only to form a second one. Would the Violet Point Elder be able to withstand such a rate of depletion of energy? Violet Elder Old Man, I'll give you a hand. Another spiritual infant tear, Cultivator, appeared, and he simply slashed out directly with his sword at the casket. Hung! A slash of sword chi took the form of a divine sword that was as long as 1,000 feet, which ruthlessly sliced forth. Pung! The divine sword sliced down on the casket and instantly invoked multiple ripples of light and shadow. Wu! Rong Huan Xian called out in pain. Though he was not directly attacked, the vibration from the impact of the strike still caused him much pain. Chapter 448, Battle Royale. Chapter 448, Battle Royale. Dark Angel _ Sure enough, even if a level 10 spirit tool like the 3 Lives Corpse Casket was triggered, it could only display the battle prowess at the level of the spiritual infant tier. However, in a place like the North region, the spiritual infant tier was already considered the strongest level. A Rong Huan Xian that possessed the 3 Lives Corpse Casket was still the cause of much headache. He only needed to continue hiding in the 3 Lives Corpse Casket and not come out, and really, there might be no one capable of doing anything to him. Wong. However, after receiving the strike of this divine sword, the patterns on the 3 Lives Corpse Casket flickered, and immediately formed another Skull Soldier that charged towards the spiritual infant tier, Cultivator, that had delivered the sword strike. This spiritual infant tier Cultivator had absolutely no interest in being entangled by the 3 Lives Corpse Casket, and his figure immediately flickered. Choosing not to have a face-to-face confrontation with the Skull Soldier, he waved his sword once more and delivered another strike at the 3 Lives Corpse Casket. Ah! Rong Huan Xian once again shouted in pain. The casket allowed him to avoid any direct attacks, but the impact caused by spiritual infant tier level attacks still caused him a lot of suffering. Another Skull Soldier appeared and charged towards that spiritual infant tier, Cultivator. Everyone could not help but pale. One attack would cause the appearance of a Skull Soldier. Who could hold up to that? Even the strongest spiritual infant tier Cultivator would not be able to stand against the combined forces of so many Skull Soldiers. The second spiritual infant tier Cultivator once again dodged and struck in another attack with his divine sword. This naturally led to the appearance of the 4th Skull Soldier. Could there be no limit to the number of Skull Soldiers that this casket could summon? As Ling Han watched on, he thought that there was definitely a limit. But the 3 Lives Corpse Casket was a level 10 spirit tool. A spiritual infant tier Cultivator wanted to force it to its limit? That was impossible. They were both level 10 spirit tools, but the 3 Lives Corpse Casket was really very powerful, far surpassing the Demon Birth Sword. It really proves itself to be the imitation of the 3 Lives Corpse Casket of the underworld. Even I feel slightly covetous of it. Yen Tian, Zhao murmured to himself. His voice was very low, but Ling Han still managed to hear him. After the second spiritual infant tier, Cultivator delivered a series of 7 strikes at the 3 Lives Corpse Casket. Finally, he was no longer capable of attacking again because there were already 7 Skull Soldiers ganging up on him, causing him to no longer have the excess energy to attack. Ha 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 ha! You are only a mere spiritual infant tier Cultivator, and you want to stand against me? Rong Huan Xian's arrogant laughter sounded very unpleasant to hear. However, the 3 Lives Corpse Casket was indeed very powerful, and they had no choice but to concede that. Ling Han said internally to Small Tower, just take a look, he just has a level 10 spirit tool and is already so awesome, whereas I have to behave myself, tucking my tail between my legs. Why is there such a huge disparity? Small Tower replied calmly, "If you want to, I, too, can display my full power. You can destroy whomever you like as well. Anyways, you're the master, so I obey you." But Ling Han was only expressing some of his laments. How could he not know revealing the Black Tower would tempt out those really powerful characters? However, Small Tower was really too much of a ruffian, whereas he, on the other hand, almost had his nose bent out of irritation. Why did he feel that this tool spirit was quite a hooligan in essence? There were in total 3 spiritual infant tier cultivators present, and they all made their move respectively, but it only caused the appearance of even more skull soldiers that suppressed them completely. What nonsense, spiritual infant tier cultivators! Wait until I obtain the inheritance in the 12 heaven mystery realms. Then I will return and refine you all into corpse soldiers. Ha ha! Rong Huan Xian laughed uproariously. Who would be able to play around with spiritual infant tier cultivators in the palm of his hand, whilst he himself was only in the spiritual pedestal tier? Only he. All those cultivators of the flower blossom tier and the spiritual infant tier roared in rage. But what could they do? They had no way to break through the defenses of the 3 lives corpse casket. Yet Ling Han nodded internally. In the case of passive defenses, one needed only to be in the deity transformation tier and would still be able to kill Rong Huan Xian with the impact of one's attacks, even with the 3 lives corpse casket in the way. Of course, that was based on the premise that Rong Huan Xian's cultivation was not in the deity transformation tier yet. This was enough proof of the might of the 3 lives corpse casket. It was merely in a state of passive defense, yet one would still need an attack at the level of deity transformation tier to kill the person hiding within it. Rong Huan Xian continued to propel the 3 lives corpse casket in flight. Some flower blossom tier cultivators were still in pursuit, unwilling to give up the chase, whereas others had already turned around and left. There was nothing they could do to this guy if he continued to hide inside the casket. 10 days later, all the powerful cultivators left helplessly. There was no meaning to continue being obsessed over the casket, because it was obvious that Rong Huan Xian had a spatial ring and did not need to worry that he would starve to death. The only people remaining in pursuit were Ling Han, Hunyo, and Yen Tian Zhao. Ling Han and Hunyo chased together, whereas Yen Tian Zhao was on his own. The 3 of them hid themselves as they continued the pursuit. However, when those flower blossom tier and spiritual infant tier cultivators all left, Yen Tian Zhao shot out, and with a great leap, arrived in front of the 3 lives corpse casket. "Hand out the key, and I shall spare you." Yen Tian Zhao commanded calmly. "You are only in the spiritual pedestal tier. How boldly you speak." Rong Huan Xian came out of the casket and shot a cold smirk at Yen Tian Zhao. "When I moved unhindered in this world, who knows where your ancestor was, and you actually dare behave insolently in front of me." Yen Tian Zhao moved directly, aiming to grab Rong Huan Xian. Ling Han did not move. He was afraid that Rong Huan Xian would escape back into the 3 lives corpse casket. In that case, that would be like a tiger trying to bite through a turtle shell with no idea where to bite. On the other hand, it would be much easier to snatch the key from Yen Tian Zhao's grasp. What a joke! Rong Huan Xian was naturally fearless and drew out a long saber as he delivered a strike. Though the personal battle prowess of disciples of the 1,000 Corpse sect were usually not very strong, there were still exceptions to the rule. For example, Rong Huan Xian had obtained the inheritance of the sect leader, and though he had not managed to get the other level 10 spirit tool, the demonic noise saber, he managed to get a saber technique which could be used together with the demonic noise saber. The grade of this saber technique was not too low, and it could be used as long as one had cultivated corpse chi. How strong this saber technique would depend on one's achievements in terms of corpse chi cultivation. Thus, Rong Huanxian still had some level of ability in saber techniques, and formed 5 flashes of saber qi that slashed at Yan Tianzhao with a single strike of his saber. Yan Tianzhao neither dodged nor ducked. He stretched open his right hand, and martial intent surged. Multiple green-colored silken threads spread out, and like a net, moved to encircle Rong Huanxian. "Rip apart!" "Rong Huanxian," declared Charlie. His saber qi slashed forth, but this green-colored net was completely unscathed. What? He could not help but be stunned. How could the quality of this person's qi be so far above his own? Ignorant brat! Yan Tianzhao's large net had already opened up and surrounded Rong Huanxian completely. Damn it! Rong Huanxian had not thought that there would be such a huge gap between himself and this man. He hurriedly retreated, intending to duck back into hiding inside the 3 lives corpse casket. "I have already moved. Do you still think you can escape?" Yan Tianzhao asked in disdain. Both ends of the green net had already joined together and wrapped around Rong Huanxian. Rong Huanxian emitted a roar of rage. Because he had underestimated his foe, he had fallen into such passive circumstances. He expelled a sharp whistle from his mouth. Pung! A figure actually appeared out of the 3 lives corpse casket and charged to attack Yan Tianzhao. This was a corpse soldier, and there was a shocking hole in its forehead. It was precisely that spiritual infant tear, cultivator, that had been killed by the 3 lives corpse casket 10 days ago. Now, it had already been refined into a corpse soldier. However, because there had not been enough time, it had not been refined completely and only had the battle prowess of a high-level spiritual pedestal tier cultivator. But there was completely no issue for it to detain Yan Tianzhao and not allow him a chance to make a move on Rong Huanxian. Ling Han smiled. It was time for him to make a move. He jumped out and immediately charged out. Without hesitation, he drew the demon birth sword and struck at both Rong Huanxian and Yan Tianzhao. Damn it! Rong Huanxian and Yan Tianzhao both humphed, but the timing of this strike was too well calculated. It had taken advantage of this particular instant when the 2 of them were embroiled in a fierce battle and their defenses were at their weakest. Updated by Novelful. Com Hong. Right at this moment, the 3 lives corpse casket slid over and stood in between Ling Han and Rong Huanxian. Chapter 449. The Origins of Yan Tianzhao. Chapter 449. The Origins of Yan Tianzhao. Pung! The sword flash struck, all of it delivered onto the 3 lives corpse casket. This was a level 10 spirit tool, and very easily managed to block all the damage from Ling Han's strike. Thankfully, the demon birth sword was also a level 10 spirit tool. As a result, it did not evoke a counterattack from the 3 lives corpse casket. But the 3 lives corpse casket was already making a move to cover Rong Huanxian. As long as Rong Huanxian hid back inside, then he would once again be invincible. Ling Han, you can't do anything to me. Rong Huanxian sneered. Since he had seen Hunyao, how could he not be certain of Ling Han's identity? Hold on, where was that little girl? He had just seen her just now. Why was there no sign of her now? Ah! He suddenly screamed. He turned to take a look, and Hunyao's little head had actually appeared in the green net. Furthermore, the corner of her mouth was still bloody. She had actually bitten off 2 of his fingers, and one of them was wearing his spatial ring. No! He immediately shouted loudly. The spatial ring was not worth much, but the problem was that it contained all his possessions, which included the key that he had snatched from the Jiang clan. Hunyao bared her mouth in a grin. She and Ling Han had coordinated very well. One of them would attack head-on to attract attention, whereas the other would deliver a sneak attack from the side. She forcefully bit through the green net with her bite that had the power of 20 stars of flower blossom tear behind it, and while she was at it, bit off 2 of Rong Huanxian's fingers as well. She retreated quickly. Pung! The Three Lives corpse casket closed up and swallowed Rong Huanxian inside. Kill them! Kill all of them! Rong Huanxian's muffled voice was heard from inside. Losing 2 fingers was no issue. As long as his heart was unscathed, corpse chi could regrow all organs and limbs. But the spatial ring had to be snatched back. Immediately, the corpse soldier turned its focus to Ling Han. Yen Tianzhao too. With a wave of his right hand, he took back his green net. His eyes turned to Ling Han, filled with frost, and said coldly, "Hand over the key, and I can spare your life." Ling Han casually erased the divine sense that Rong Huanxian had left on the spatial ring. With a sweep of his own divine sense, sure enough, he found that there was a silver key inside. It was made of some kind of unknown material, and was as thick as a child's arm. He smiled faintly, and simply stored the spatial ring into the black tower. Then he quickly dodged in a flash, not intending to come into a straight confrontation with the corpse soldier. That was absolutely meaningless. "Oh, in the first place, the victor in the battle between you and I has not been decided, and I was precisely planning to have a good, fun battle. If you force me to give it my all, the only path for you is death." Yen Tian Zhao declared coldly. With a wave of his right hand, a flash of green light shot out, which actually transformed into a wing. The wing was exceedingly thin, and like an exceptional heavenly blade, slashed towards Ling Han. Ling Han drew his sword. Ding! When the long sword clashed onto the wing, fierce sparks of fire actually flickered. Upon a closer look, those weren't ordinary sparks, but rather a multitude of patterned designs. What a terrifying Yen Tian Zhao! The martial intent that he delivered was actually on par with a level 10 spirit tool. But it was right at this moment that the corpse soldier waved a claw at Yen Tian Zhao. The command it had received was to kill everyone, and that naturally included Yen Tian Zhao. At first, Yen Tian Zhao was further away from it, so it naturally attacked Ling Han, who was closer first. However, now that Yen Tian Zhao had all of a sudden rushed so close to it, it naturally did not mind attacking him as well. "Fuck!" Yen Tian Zhao cursed. No matter how glorious his last life had been, he now only had the cultivation level of the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. There was absolutely no way he could ignore a corpse soldier with flower blossom tier cultivation level, even if it had not been completely refined. He once again shot another attack, but this one was headed towards the corpse soldier. Ling Han rushed forwards, and with a wave of the demon birth sword, 10 flashes of sword chi appeared. The 4 seasons sword technique was already in use, the various concepts moving in a wave like the passage of time. This time it was now he and the corpse soldier combining forces against Yen Tian Zhao. Yen Tian Zhao was suspected to have been taken over by the spirit of a god. His battle prowess was astonishingly and terrifyingly powerful, and he easily managed to disperse the combined attacks of Ling Han and the corpse soldier. However, the moment Ling Han came near, the corpse soldier turned the focus of its attacks onto Ling Han, making the situation extremely chaotic. The 3 sides were embroiled in a chaotic battle, and Ling Han, as the person who had obtained the key, naturally became the priority target of attack. But the corpse soldier was a standard double-faced character. If it was able to attack Ling Han, then it would. But if Ling Han was further away from it, it wouldn't just stand idly either. It would accordingly head to attack Yen Tian Zhao, making Yen Tian Zhao feel very gloomy. This ally was really too unreliable. As Hunyo watched from the side, she kept clapping her hands in excitement. She was absolutely confident in Ling Han. After a period of time to accumulate power, Ling Han struck, and the mysterious 3,000 technique was out in full glory. 1,000 sword flashes. The 4 seasons sword technique was only a black grade high-level martial arts technique, but the spiritual pedestal tier could already use earth grade martial arts techniques, and the mysterious 3,000 was a martial arts technique which had a grade surpassing heaven grade, its power only limited by the comprehension that the wielder had about sword arts. In the instant that Ling Han leaped from black grade all the way to surpassing heaven grade, the power of his sword attack naturally soared like crazy. Xiao, xiao, xiao. The 1,000 sword flashes were tightly condensed together, and every single sword flash was equivalent to Ling Han's full power attack. And how shockingly powerful was that? Furthermore, this was an attack that had been delivered with a level 10 spirit tool. Yan Tian Zhao immediately gave a muffled humph and, stretching out both arms, made multiple green threads spread out. This time, they did not form a net, but were far more tightly woven than a net. They actually formed 2 wings that were comprised of patterned designs that shielded him within. The corpse soldier, meanwhile, continued to rush forwards dumbly and also suffered a major part of the might of the sword flashes. Pum! The sword flashes shattered, which created a large explosion, making for a very terrifying display. When the sword flashes had completely disappeared, the corpse soldier was visibly riddled with holes. Its left arm had been sliced off as well. However, it continued to pounce at Ling Han, possessing absolutely no fear of death. Meanwhile, Yan Tian Zhao was far better off. The wings of light that had protected him had only lost a few feathers, whereas he was completely unscathed. This naturally was also because the majority of the attack had been sustained by the corpse soldier. He had to admit, in terms of the toughness of physique, the corpse soldier was absolutely on par with precious metal and could compare to the body of iron sheet. Furthermore, this was also because this corpse soldier had not been refined completely and could only be considered as slightly above the level of a level 2 silver-armored corpse soldier, and had yet to reach the stage of level 3. Otherwise, even mysterious 3,000 would not be able to inflict any damage to it. After all, this was a technique meant to attack a whole group, whereas 10,000 techniques was the real, devastating attack. This is a sword technique from the Heaven's Sword Palace. Yan Tian Zhao exclaimed in surprise, his brow slightly frowning. That's not right. There is a Heaven's Sword sect here. Could it be that you are a disciple of that place? No, you came from the Rain Country, so there should be no relation between you and the Heaven's Sword sect. Could it be that you are the reincarnation of some powerful character from the Heaven's Sword Palace? His first words were actually spoken to himself, but his last few words were a question directed at Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, I don't have any relation with the Heaven's Sword Palace. On the other hand, you, who know of the existence of the Heaven's Sword Palace, I assume that you are someone from the realm of gods, then? Realm of gods? Yan Tian Zhao suddenly laughed loudly after a moment of being stunned. With an expression filled with disdain, he said, Ignorant fool of the lower realm, you are ignorant beyond compare. To tell you the truth, I am indeed Yan Tian Zhao. However, when I was young, I accidentally triggered a device which contained the memories of a god, and was thus slightly affected. Ling Han finally understood. Memories were something that should not be trifled with carelessly. Why was he unwilling to use the art of searching another's soul? That was because after he touched the memories of another, they would merge with his own memories. And once there was a large amount of such memories, he would not be able to differentiate which memories were his own and which belonged to another. It would definitely affect him, and there might even be a great, dramatic change in his character. At that time, Yan Tianzhao was only 5 years old, and his personal characteristic had yet to be fully formed. How could he then withstand a whole lifetime of memories of a god? As a result, his character naturally changed dramatically. He was practically the carbon copy of that god and had become incredibly evil. That was why he had been sealed away. Chapter 450, The Dust Has Settled. Chapter 450, The Dust Has Settled. Fuck. From within the 3 Lives corpse casket, Rong Huan Xian could be heard cursing. He was really an unlucky one. First, he was possessed by a Jura demon emperor, someone on the par of gods, and now he encountered a monster that possessed the memories of a god. Moreover, it was very possible that Ling Han had some kind of relation with the ancient era. However, Yen Tian Zhao did not even bother to give him any attention. In his eyes, Rong Huan Xian was naturally the most minor character out of a whole batch of minor characters, and was absolutely unworthy of his notice. He looked at Ling Han seriously and said, "Is my sincerity enough? Ling Han, how about this? I don't need you to hand the key over to me, but I want to enter the Sagittarius Palace Hall with you and take a certain item from inside." When he saw Ling Han frown, he immediately waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, this item is absolutely useless to you." He paused a moment, then continued, "I can also get rid of the brat inside the casket for you. Others may not be able to do anything to the 3 lives corpse casket, but it has no effect on me. I can drag him out of it." Fuck! Rong Huan Xian cursed again. If it was anyone else saying that, he would naturally scoff in disdain. However, Yen Tian Zhao possessed the memories of a god and could be considered as the reincarnation of a god, so who knew he might possibly have a way to deal with the 3 lives corpse casket. Yet Ling Han grinned and answered, "No way!" Why? Yen Tian Zhao was practically about to go crazy. He had already made enough concessions, yet Ling Han had still rejected his offer. Ling Han said, "As for the brat inside the casket, I am indeed unable to kill him now, but it won't take me too many years to be able to drag him out and kill him. It's a good thing to let him live as a reminder to myself. As for that key, he is obviously mine, so why do I need to hand it over to you? Furthermore, even a god would place so much importance on it. TSK, TSK, TSK. That is even more the reason that I can't miss out on it. You." Yen Tianzhao was greatly enraged, and with a sudden leap, charged to attack Ling Han. Since negotiations had failed, the only option left now was to settle things with one's fists. "Then you'll just have to see the terrifying battle prowess of our peacock race." Yen Tian Zhao humphed frostily. As he waved both arms in attack, wings actually formed, but these wings were 100 feet long and covered with closely woven patterns that shone with glorious light and looked to be extremely terrifying in might. Ling Han used the mysterious 3,000 sword technique. He did not need to spend any time to accumulate power. It was enough for him to deliver 100+ sword flashes with every strike to shatter all the wings that Yen Tianzhao was shooting at him. The whole area was filled with shattered feathers that immediately transformed into a multitude of pattern designs, which then quickly darkened and disappeared. "Kill! Kill! Kill!" Yen Tianzhao's expression became evil beyond compare, and as his figure turned swiftly, it was as if he had really become a gigantic peacock, his wings fluttering violently and murderous intent as far as the eye could see. Ling Han was neither shocked nor afraid. If he used the mysterious 3,000 sword technique, 100 sword flashes would be tossed out, and it was enough for him to stand on equal footing with Yen Tianzhao. Damn it, I am, after all, no longer in the body of a peacock, and am unable to display the might of the Bright King's secret technique to its fullest. Yen Tianzhao roared in rage, but the madness in his eyes did not decrease in the slightest, and rather seemed to be aroused even further. "Give me my key." Hung. Green flames actually erupted from his whole body, and actually warped the space. Ling Han immediately felt an instant of dizziness. "Poison," he thought, quickly drawing out a petal of the golden flower of the stone, and swallowed it. Then he turned to look at Hunyao. Thankfully, the little girl was some distance away, and so had not been surrounded by the flames. However, after he swallowed a petal of the golden flower of the stone, Ling Han felt that the dizziness that he was feeling was under control, but still did not feel any better. It was obvious that even the golden flower of the stone was unable to cleanse the poison of these flames, and could only provide temporary relief. Hiss! What kind of poison could this be, that even the golden flower of the stone, something that was claimed to be able to cleanse 10,000 poisons, could do nothing against it? Ling Han's battle spirit did not decrease, but rather soared. Gripping the demon birth sword, he exclaimed, "Yen Tianzhao, receive a strike from me!" Hung, The thunder battle armor was activated and transformed into a barrier that isolated him from the flames. At this moment, the corpse soldier was already rendered mostly useless. It was first heavily damaged by Ling Han's mysterious 3,000 sword technique, followed by Yen Tian Zhao's green flames, so its threat level could now be completely ignored. Thus, Ling Han needed only direct all his focus on Yen Tian Zhao. With a flick of his sword, Ling Han once again used the mysterious 3,000 sword technique. Instantly, 1,000 sword flashes appeared in a wave that hid the sky and covered the earth. Yen Tian Zhao hurriedly stretched open his green wings and shielded himself within. When the sword flashes crashed into them, light from the multiple patterned designs flew everywhere, forcing him into a continuous retreat. When the sword flashes gradually disappeared, the wings that he had used to protect himself were also damaged. When the sword flashes decreased to about 200, the green wings were also completely shattered. Pooh, pew, pew. The sword flashes wreaked havoc, and instantly blood sprayed like crazy. Ling Han was secretly shocked. He really could not underestimate this guy. If it wasn't for the fact that he had increased his original 7 flashes of sword chi to 9 flashes, even the mysterious 3,000 sword technique would not be able to penetrate Yen Tian Zhao's defenses. As Yen Tian Zhao roared in rage, he continued to throw up blood. This time, he had suffered quite a serious injury. Yet it was exactly this moment that Peng, the 3 lives corpse casket opened, and Rong Huan Xian charged out with a direct slash in Yen Tian Zhao's direction. This was the moment that Yen Tian Zhao was at his weakest, and how could he have thought that Rong Huan Xian would actually make a move against him? Thus he was instantly hit. Pooh, green-colored blood sprayed everywhere. He had actually been sliced in 2 halves at the waist. You actually attacked me? Yen Tian Zhao wore an expression of absolute disbelief. Nonsense. You yourself said that you can drag me out of the 3 lives corpse casket. Whom else am I going to kill if not you? Rong Huan Xian smirked coldly. In comparison, he could still protect himself with Ling Han, and even if he did not manage to get the treasure inside the 12 Heaven Mystery Realms, it was no great loss to him. It wasn't his in the first place, so naturally he did not feel any bitter anguish about it. Yen Tian Zhao felt very depressed. He had never imagined that someone that could only be considered a mere ant in his eyes would actually cause him such severe injury. But how could he die as easily as this? The upper half and lower half of his body actually moved on their own. One half broke out into a run with 2 legs, whereas the other pushed down onto the ground with both hands. Then with a leap, his upper half landed on top of his lower half, as if they could be attached back. When the mystery realms open, I will definitely stop you, and you, he said to Ling Han first, then pointing at the 3 lives corpse casket. The next time we meet, I will definitely turn you into a corpse. After saying such, he broke out into a run and fled. Hong, 2 green-colored wings of light actually sprouted from his back, and as he stretched them out, he instantly shot into the skies and fled. He didn't die even from that. Ling Han stood with the help of his sword. Yen Tian Zhao could absolutely be considered as the reincarnation of the spirit of an ancient god, and knew a shockingly large number of secret techniques. He didn't die even from being cut in half, so the next time they met, would he have to crush his heart, or perhaps his head? Ling Han, don't be too pleased with yourself. I will get myself a gold-armored corpse, and will definitely take your life next time. Rong Huan Xian also threw out a line that fitted the situation, and was obviously intending to flee. I know. Go on, Ling Han said impatiently. You, Rong Huan Xian humphed. He was extremely displeased with Ling Han's attitude, as if he was some minor character of negligible importance. He swore to himself that he would definitely make Ling Han regret this. Hong, the 3 lives corpse casket slid away, and Rong Huan Xian left inside it. Ling Han, meanwhile, was in deep thought. for Yen Tian Zhao's situation. Was he the reincarnation of a god from his last life, or was he still himself? In his case, what category did he belong to then? Was he, too, in the situation that the memories of his last life had been transferred into this body? This caused him to feel at a bit of a loss. Ling Han! Hun Yo leaped over and tugged on Ling Han's hand. This made Ling Han instantly break out into a smile and chased away the confusion in his heart. He was who he was. He was neither the alchemy emperor he had been in his last life, nor was he the useless young man of this lifetime. Rather, he was an existence formed from the merging of these two, possessing both their merits and their shortcomings, a real, living person. And that was enough. Come, let's go back, Ling Han said with a smile. Hun Yo nodded in earnestness. Chapter 451, A Noble from the Middle State. Chapter 451, A Noble from the Middle State. On the way back to Extreme Yang City, Ling Han removed his disguise. Thus, when he reached Extreme Yang City, he had naturally regained his identity as the owner of both Forget Not and Alchemist King Pavilion. He had disappeared for 10 days, and Lu Yutong and the others were all very worried. Thankfully, he had finally returned, which relieved their worries. Ling Han went to the Spirit Treasures Pavilion again, thinking that Yin Hong must have finally managed to get the 9-leaf black Ganoderma for him by now, right? I'm really sorry. The moment Yin Hong saw him, she hurriedly apologized, which gave Ling Han a feeling of foreboding. Indeed, he heard her continue to say, "That spirit herb that you wanted has been intercepted by another." Who did it? Ling Han's killing intent soared. This spirit herb involved the crucial matter of whether Ling Dongxing would be able to cultivate again, and for this reason, he would not hesitate to commit murder. The details are not very clear yet. They only mentioned that they sold it to someone by the surname of Tang, and coincidentally, according to my investigation, he has also come to Extreme Yang City, and is currently in the North Pill Pavilion, Yin Hong said. I'm really sorry. I had originally come to an agreement with the seller, but this person with the surname Tang should have a very prominent background. That must be why the seller did not hesitate in offending me and still adamantly sold the spirit herb to another. I had been intending to communicate with that person with the surname Tang and see if he would be willing to resell it to me. However, before I even began communicating, you have already rushed here, Yin Hong continued. Ling Han nodded and said, "Still, thank you." At least he now knew the rough location of the 9-leaf black Ganoderma. You need to take care. This man was able to make the seller refuse to give me face. Either he boasts incredible ability and skill, or has an extremely prominent background, Yin Hong said seriously. I know. Ling Han stood up and left. As Yin Hong watched Ling Han's figure gradually disappear at the main doors to the courtyard, she could not help but support her chin and murmur, "That's odd. Is there any great person by the surname of Tang in the North region?" Ling Han headed directly to the North Pill Pavilion. Though he was already an Earth-grade alchemist and had already been in Extreme Yang City for a great many days, there were not really that many times that he had ventured here. At most, he had come to select and buy some seeds of spirit herbs to enrich the space in the Black Tower. He made some queries about the person with the surname Tang among the staff in the Pill Pavilion, but every single one of them simply shook their heads, expressing that they did not know either. When he recalled that this person with the surname Tang could have come from a very prominent background, and that it was probably normal that these people at the lower ranks did not know of him, Ling Han decided to find some higher-ranked person and ask. But how could an ordinary person enter into the important areas of the Northern Pill Pavilion? He was just about to reveal his identity as an Earth-grade alchemist when he saw 3 people walk in from outside. 2 of them walked slightly ahead, whereas the third walked a bit further behind. One of the 2 people walking ahead was fully dressed in a simple, elegant white robe, with luxuriant black hair and a white silken veil hiding her face. Though there might be uncountable numbers of women who dressed in this way in the world, there was only one person whose mere vague image could make one fantasize endlessly. Zhu Xian'er. There was a young man by her side who looked to be in his mid-20s and was in the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. A man with this kind of cultivation level could be considered as one of the top elite prodigies in extreme Yang City. However, there was an elite cultivator of the flower blossom tier following behind the both of them. He wore an expression of utmost seriousness and followed them closely. From the looks of his attitude, this elite cultivado of the flower blossom tier actually seemed to be the servant of the two people walking ahead. Ling Han knew that Zhu Xian'er definitely did not have that kind of extravagance. Then that elite cultivator of the flower blossom tier had to be the underling of that young man. However, even in the case of the Winter Moon sect and the Beast Emperor sect, what sect could allow their disciples to make use of a flower blossom tier cultivator as a mere bodyguard cum servant? Flower blossom tier cultivators were definitely a pillar of support for any sect, and it was highly possible that this kind of person could become an ultimate elite cultivator of the spiritual infant tier. This young man appeared to come from an extremely prominent background. When he remembered what Yin Hong had said previously, Ling Han was practically sure that this young man was that person with the surname Tang. Grandmaster Ling. When Zhu Xian'er saw Ling Han, it was as if she had seen her savior. Her beautiful eyes instantly lit up, and she walked delicately over to him. If you have time, Xian'er has something that I would like Grandmaster Ling's help on. Grandmaster. When the young man heard this address, he instantly looked disdainful and said, Xian'er, if you want to learn about alchemy, you can ask me as much as you like. As a black-grade high-level alchemist, I naturally would be able to answer all your questions. This young man was actually a black-grade high-level alchemist? TSK, that was really exceptional. No wonder he was so arrogant. However, if he was merely a black-grade high-level alchemist, he probably was still not qualified to have an elite cultivator of the flower blossom tier act as his guard, right? Ling Han turned towards that young man and asked, And who are you? How dare you? You actually dare to speak to young Master Tang in such a tone? That flower blossom tier elite cultivator immediately rebuked angrily, his eyes sharp and piercing, filled with killing intent. For a flower blossom tier cultivator that had cast off their mortal shell, an angry rebuke accompanied with a fierce glare was naturally filled with power and capable of scaring a spiritual pedestal tier cultivator to their knees. It was naturally a deliberate move on his part. His young master was currently in the process of pursuing Zhu Xian'er, but from the looks of things now, Zhu Xian'er seemed to bear affection for Ling Han. Then he naturally had to greatly embarrass the latter in front of Zhu Xian'er and humiliate him in front of her. But who was Ling Han? He had a sliver of divine sense left from the heaven tier, and furthermore was a ruler who had formed 9 flashes of qi. So how could he be suppressed by someone else's imposing attitude? He merely picked at his ear and said, Why are you so vigorously shouting? Your own ears may not be working, so do you think that others are all deaf as well? Insolence. The flower blossom tier cultivator flew into a powerful rage at his words. A mere spiritual pedestal tier cultivator actually dared to be insolent in front of him. Was he ignorant of the hierarchy of martial arts? How could that be acceptable? Zhu Xian'er hurriedly stopped them and said with absolute seriousness, This Ling Han, Grandmaster Ling, is an earth-grade, low-level alchemist. What? That flower blossom tier cultivator immediately stared with extremely wide eyes. No matter how he looked at it, Ling Han was only about 18 or 19 years old, and he was already an earth-grade alchemist? One had to know that even for a genius like young Master Tang, he was only a black-grade high-level alchemist. Though there was only the gap of a single level between black-grade high-level and earth-grade low-level. This gap was enough to make one lose all hope for his entire lifetime, as it was a gap he could forever be unable to breach. So what if you are an earth-grade alchemist? The young man merely sneered coldly. In front of me, even an earth-grade high-level alchemist is not enough. Brat, get out of here immediately, otherwise I will have you die. Ling Han did not get angry, but rather smiled and asked calmly, I don't think I have offended you in any way, have I? You spoke to Xian'er without getting permission from me, and that is your sin, the young man said coldly. Yet Zhu Xian'er was irritated and asked, What relation is there with you whomever I speak to? Of course there's relation. The young man laughed lightly. I have my eye on you, and since you're my woman, then naturally no other man is allowed to speak to you. If they did, then they would merely be seeking death. Don't you speak nonsense. Zhu Xian'er rebuked furiously. However, the young man merely laughed loudly and said, I heard that Yao Huiyu also has his eye on you, and it was because I heard that I deliberately raced all the way here from the Middle State. I wanted to take a look for myself what kind of magnificent beauty was capable of moving the heart of that sword maniac. That bastard is always against me, and though I can't compare to him in terms of martial arts, I can snatch away the woman that he admires. Ha 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 ha. I really want to see his expression when he finds out. Dream on. Zhu Xian'er humphed icily. Is it? A contemplative smile played about the young man's lips. Didn't you want to concoct a heaven-grade alchemical pill? There are only 2 heaven-grade alchemists in the whole of the Middle State, and one of them is my great-grandfather. On what basis do you intend to have a heaven-grade alchemist concoct alchemical pills for you? In the case of our Tang clan, we have concocted alchemical pills for multiple generations, and the amount of wealth we have accumulated over the years is incredibly terrifying. So what kind of bargaining chip can you offer that would make my great-grandfather interested? Unless you become my woman, and I will beg my great-grandfather to concoct an alchemical pill on your behalf. Chapter 452, The Descendant of a Disciple. Chapter 452, The Descendant of a Disciple. The surname Tang and an aristocratic clan of alchemists. Ling Han was slightly startled. At first, he had not thought much about the surname Tang, but his heart was lightly moved when he heard aristocratic clan of alchemists. He asked, Is there someone called Tang Xiao Yuan in your family line? What Tang Xiao Yuan? At first, the young man humphed, but then an expression of astonishment immediately appeared on his face, and he asked, How did you know the name of my clan's founder? Fuck, he really was. Ling Han thought. In his last life, he had a total of 4 disciples too studied martial arts under him, whereas the other 2 studied alchemy, and one of his 2 alchemy disciples was named Yin Wang, whereas the other was called Tang Xiao Yuan. This was a descendant of one of his disciples. Fuck, this was really deceiving one's master and eliminating one's ancestor. Ling Han humphed and said, That is not something you should bother with. On the basis of your ancestor, kneel down and apologize, then hand the 9-leaf black Ganoderma over, and I will not lower myself to your level and call you to accounts. How dare you? The young man was so furious his nose was bent out of shape. I, Tang Zuming, am already considerably arrogant, but compared with you, I find that I am actually quite modest. Gao Feng, kill him. The last few words were directed at the flower blossom tier elite cultivator behind him. This man had the surname of Zhua, with the given name of Gao Feng. There was naturally no shortage of powerful cultivators willing to follow a heaven-grade alchemist. If it wasn't for the fact that there was a barrier separating the Middle State and the North region, he would have definitely brought a deity transformation tier ultimate elite cultivator with him, who would be able to sweep aside all opposition in the whole North region single-handedly. How awesome would that be? Young Master Tang, this person is an Earth-grade alchemist. Zhuo Gaofeng was slightly hesitant. In the whole world, there were only 2 heaven-grade alchemists, and as a result, Earth-grade alchemists were already very impressive. Furthermore, Ling Han was still so young, and in future, who knows, he might be able to become a great boss of alchemy whose mighty reputation could suppress the whole world. What are you afraid of? My great-grandfather is a heaven-grade alchemist, Tang Zuming declared arrogantly. Shuo Gaofeng was no longer hesitant. Heaven-grade alchemist was the most awesome existence in this world that could stand on equal footing with shattering void-tier cultivators, and they could be claimed to be the leaders of all the alchemists of this world. In that case, so what if he killed an earth-grade alchemist? He would not need to ask another alchemist to concoct alchemical pills for him, and there was absolutely no need for him to take anyone else into account. Die. He immediately struck and delivered an attack in Ling Han's direction. Stop! Zhu Xian'er was extremely shocked. She had originally intended to speak with Ling Han deliberately and put up a pretense of intimacy between the two of them so that Tang Zuming would leave on his own initiative. She had never thought that this Tang Zuming was really a typical profligate, young master arrogant, and unreasonable that would actually attempt to have Ling Han killed. The cause of this trouble was her, and she immediately leaped out to stand between Ling Han and Zhuo Gaofeng. However, in front of a flower blossom tier cultivator, what use would her paltry power be? Zhuo Gaofeng merely crooked his fingers slightly, and Zhu Xian'er was gently pushed to one side and also had her cultivation sealed. This attack from Zhuo Gaofeng, meanwhile, continued on its path with practically no hindrance towards Ling Han. Pum! Ling Han was instantly sent flying. He actually tore a hole into 7 consecutive walls as he flew before finally stopping. Not dead yet. Zhuo Gaofeng looked surprised. Right before the power of his attack impacted him, this brat actually had a defensive armor which exuded the divine light of thunder, and it was this that blocked the majority of his attack. And it was precisely because of this that Ling Han was only sent flying and possibly had a few bones broken, spat out several mouthfuls of blood, but was adamantly not dead. This was extremely shocking. A grand elite cultivator of the flower blossom tier moved, and was actually unable to kill a mere junior in the spiritual pedestal tier with a single strike. Who dares to make trouble in our North Pill Pavilion? A cold humph was heard. Previously, Ling Han and the others were only engaged in a verbal battle, and the North Pill Pavilion would naturally not take this into account. However, now that they had broken out into a fight and actually caused some damage to the Pill Pavilion, this would of course lure out the elite cultivators in the North Pill Pavilion. Young Master Tang. Zhuo Gaofeng turned around and looked at Tang Zuming in question. Continue. Tang Zuming commanded coldly, and then called out loudly, I am Tang Zuming, and my great-grandfather is a heaven-grade alchemist from the Middle State, Grandmaster Tang Zisher. Whoever dares to interfere would be standing on opposite sides of our Tang clan. He drew out a token. An ordinary person would naturally not recognize what it was, but every earth-grade alchemist would be very familiar with it. That was a token that indeed belonged to Grandmaster Tang Zisher. All of a sudden, it was as if all the powerful cultivators in the North Pill Pavilion had been frozen as a whole. In fact, no one actually dared to voice out anything anymore. What more to step out and make a move to stop them? Tang Zisher, Grandmaster Tang. That was one of the 2 great pillars of support of the Alchemist Society. For the alchemists in the Alchemist Society or martial artists, this was a god that stood high up on a pedestal that they could only kneel down and look up to in reverence. Pung, pung, pung. Zhuo Gaofeng continued to pursue Ling Han with much satisfaction, feeling extremely pleased with himself. Though he was in the flower blossom tier, he was definitely not considered one of the elite cultivators in the Middle State. At most, he could only be considered one of the more powerful cultivators, but here he was definitely a top-tier elite cultivator. Furthermore, with the golden badge of protection of a heaven-grade alchemist shielding him, absolutely no one dared to stop him. In the North region, he could do as he desired. This feeling gave him extremely great pleasure. Zhu Xian'er's cultivation was sealed, but this did not stop her from speaking. She called out loudly, "The one being pursued is Ling Han, Grandmaster Ling, an Earth-grade low-level alchemist." What? This time, quite a number of those who chose to remain silent wavered. On the basis of a heaven-grade alchemist's backing, you, Zhuo Gaofeng, could commit a crime and they would be unable to do anything but bear with it. But if you wanted to kill an alchemist, then the significance would be completely different. Why was the Alchemist Society established? It was precisely to protect the rights and benefits of alchemists, to form a colossal alliance that would make no martial artist dare to treat them lightly. And it was exactly this reason that allowed alchemists to have a detached status above others. But to pursue and attempt to kill an alchemist in the Alchemist Society, what kind of preposterous matter was that? If it was Tang Zishe personally acting, then naturally no one would dare to convince him to do otherwise. But now, a mere flower-blossom-tier cultivator actually dared to attempt to kill an alchemist. What more when the latter was an Earth-grade alchemist? This naturally aroused public indignation. Today, you could make an attempt to kill Ling Han. Then tomorrow, wouldn't you also be able to attempt killing me as well? Immediately, a terrifying aura spread out and forcefully suppressed Zhuo Gaofeng. The one who acted was a consecrated person of the North Pill Pavilion. He was an elite cultivator of the spiritual infant tier and had the surname of Shi. Not many knew his real name, and others all addressed him as Elder Shi. "You dare! You dare!" Yet Tang Zuming erupted into a thunderous rage. "You actually dare to stop me from killing someone I want to kill. Are you not afraid that I will fly into a rage and have this place demolished in my fury?" Ling Han strode back, his face filled with fury. He had seen a considerable number of profligate, spoilt young masters. But to be willful to such an extreme extent, Tang Zuming should be the only one. Just because his ancestor was a heaven-grade alchemist, he was actually arrogant to such an exaggerated level. "Hang, the North Pill Pavilion is not a place for you to do as you like. Get lost." Elder Shi humphed. Tang Zuming's eyes turned, and he suddenly said, "Old man, you have already been stuck in the spiritual infant tier for a great many years, haven't you? Let my guess. Firstly, you do not have a level 8 martial arts technique, and secondly, you're not strong enough to accumulate enough power and are thus unable to batter through the barrier into the deity transformation tier. However, if you help me kill this brat, I can gift you with a level 8 martial arts technique, as well as a Heaven's Heart Void pill to help you strengthen your foundations and bank up your origin power to accumulate enough energy to break through." "What?" Elder Shi instantly exclaimed in a trembling voice. His interest had been aroused. Chapter 453, A Heaven-Grade Alchemist. So what? Chapter 453, A Heaven-Grade Alchemist. So what? Elder Shi was an assigned protector of the North Pill Pavilion, and had been protecting this place for close to 100 years. Because he had not ventured to the middle state in his youth, by the time he was old, it was even less possible for him to go there. The transfer barrier would not only weaken his cultivation, it could even shake the very essence of his life. He no longer had any grand ambitions or lofty aspirations, and only desired to spend the rest of his life here in peace. Yet Tang Zuming's words caused his heart to throb wildly. A level 8 martial arts technique, the Heaven Heart Void, to strengthen his foundations and help him cultivate origin power. This allowed him to see a hope that he could break through to the deity transformation tier. If he could break through to the deity transformation tier, then he would gain another 200 years of life. Who did not want to live for a few more years? What more when it was a whole 200? That was more than double the lifetime of an ordinary person. "Old Shi, your heart has been thrown into disorder." A calm voice rang out. It sounded very clear, but when one heard closely, it was filled with age. This was the real big boss of the North Pill Pavilion, Earth-grade mid-level alchemist Gongyang Taisun who was also a powerful cultivator of the spiritual infant tier. He actually had hopes of attempting to break through to the deity transformation tier. Unfortunately, he had spent too much of his energy on alchemy. As a result, his energy reserves were all dried up, and he no longer had the energy left to make an attempt to break through to a higher cultivation level. Elder Shur gave a humph and declared, "Brother Gongyang, you have devoted yourself entirely to alchemy, and I am very impressed with your dedication. However, this could possibly be the one and only hope I have to break through, so I would kindly request you not to stop me." "Ho ho! Old Shur, you are a protector of our North Pill Pavilion. You've received money from our Alchemist Society, yet intend to turn around and hunt down one of our alchemists. Nothing so wonderful exists in this world." Gongyang Tai Sun's voice rang out again. "Then, Brother Gongyang, I shall resign from the position of protector of the North Pill Pavilion." Elder Shur declared bluntly, "How could a man who had managed to cultivate all the way to the spiritual infant tier be one who would worry incessantly about personal gains and losses?" Gongyang Tai Sun sighed and said, "They are mere empty words, and you would simply trust his word like this." There is no way that he would dare to deceive me." Elder Shur said very confidently, "Is that right?" Gongyang Tai Sun shook his head. "Old Shur, even the wisest can have a momentary lapse in judgment. With the barrier separating our respective regions, do you think you'd be able to chase him all the way to the middle state? Furthermore, spiritual infant tier cultivators could only be considered as one of the elite in the middle state, but definitely not as one of the top elite." Elder Shur could not help but be rendered speechless. In the North region, there was indeed no one who would dare deceive him. But what if this Tang brat ran all the way back to the middle state and did not return? Furthermore, he was the descendant and junior of a heaven-grade alchemist. So if he really intended to hide, would Elder Shur even dare to race to his residence and demand repayment for the favor that he had done for the former? "Please don't worry, Elder Shur. I, Tang Zuming, hereby swear that I will definitely fulfill my promise. Otherwise, may lightning strike me dead where I stand," Tang Zuming quickly declared. He was a spoilt young master. He was arrogant, he was also overbearing, but he was definitely no idiot. Even if his cultivation level could be increased with the use of alchemical pills, his status as a black-grade high-level alchemist was something that he had obtained with genuine ability after all. Elder Shur cackled wildly and declared, "Brother Gongyang, I don't want to become your enemy, so I would also like to ask you not to oppose me." Do you all think that you surely have an upper hand over me?" Ling Han spoke up. He strode over, the thunder battle armor he was wearing exuding multiple rings of lightning, making him appear extremely mighty. "You are definitely going to die today," Tang Zuming declared coldly. His greatest strength was making use of his own identity and throwing the various resources he possessed at others. Beautiful women would willingly undress for him, prodigies would bow their heads in respect, and enemies would naturally have a tragic end. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "Don't you just have a heaven-grade alchemist as an ancestor? And what's so awesome about that? Brother Gongyang, please help me make preparations. I want to test as a heaven-grade alchemist." When they heard Ling Han address Gongyang Tai Sun as brother, a great number of people gaped. Was this young man really unafraid of death? Did he not know that the only person who could stop Elder Shur in the entire North Pill Pavilion was Gongyang Tai Sun? A little earth-grade, low-level alchemist like you was on a completely different plane from an earth-grade, mid-level alchemist. And this gap could possibly be breached only after several dozens of years. Or it could even be completely hopeless for him to breach this gap in this lifetime. And he actually dared to address Gongyang Tai Sun as brother. This was a show of absolute disrespect to his seniors. However, when they heard his last few words, everyone instantly turned to stone. This guy actually wanted to be certified as a heaven-grade alchemist. This was an absolutely impossible thing. putting aside whether Ling Han had that kind of skill or not. Only the middle state had heaven-grade ingredients. Thus, even if Tang Zisher came, it would be completely useless. At most, even he could only be certified as an Earth-grade high-level alchemist here. "Don't worry, I have my own ingredients," Ling Han stated calmly. In the Alchemist Society, it was absolutely not allowed for anyone to stand in the way of a man attempting to be certified as a high-level alchemist. Even a heaven-grade alchemist was no exception. As a result, Gongyang Tai-sun only stared blankly for a moment, then said, "Prepare an alchemy chamber." Elder Sher also looked slightly surprised and hesitant as well. However, as long as Gongyang Tai-sun was insistent on shielding Ling Han, then he would definitely not be able to do anything to Ling Han in the North Pill Pavilion. That was because this Pill Pavilion had a magnificent great array in place, and once fully activated, it could even display might equivalent to a deity transformation tier cultivators. This was also one of the reasons why the Alchemist Society remained strong and steady. In the northern region, the strongest level was merely spiritual infant tier, and would they be able to stand against a great array at the level of deity transformation tier? Thankfully, Elder Sher was familiar with the workings of this great array. Thus, he was certain that he could escape alive from this great array, but to also kill Ling Han under such conditions? That was merely a fantasy. Thus, he merely engaged in a verbal argument with Gongyang Tai-sun, hoping that the latter would make concessions. "Haha, I'm really going to laugh myself to death. A mere Earth-grade low-level alchemist. And you actually want to certify as a heaven-grade alchemist?" Tang Zuming laughed uproariously. However, the other people all disliked his arrogance and obnoxious behavior, so only Zhui Gaofeng had him some face and laughed with him. "All right, follow me." Gongyang Tai-sun cast a deep, meaningful look at Ling Han. This young man was really much too young. At the time when the request for certification came from the Star Brilliance Palace Hall, he was in absolute disbelief. As a result, Ling Han had left a very deep impression on him. By now, he had naturally accepted the reality that Ling Han was an Earth-grade alchemist, but when he heard Ling Han say he wanted to be certified as a heaven-grade alchemist at this moment, 10,000 profanities still streaked through his mind. "You are merely an Earth-grade low-level alchemist. How far was the gap from Earth-grade low-level to heaven-grade alchemist?" It was not 3 levels, but rather an endless chasm. Similarly to how black-grade high-level alchemists had a 99% chance of never being able to advance to Earth-grade alchemists in their lifetime, Earth-grade high-level alchemists also had a 999% chance of never being able to break through to heaven grade. There were only 2 heaven grade alchemists in this whole world. Okay. Ling Han obviously only declared his intention to certify as a heaven grade alchemist because he was provoked. No matter how he looked at it, Ling Han was merely being rash. So how could he possibly succeed? To concoct heaven grade alchemical pills without any sort of exaggeration, even Tang Zisher and Nongbo Exen had to concentrate and calm their hearts, as well as fast for 3 or 4 days before finally starting to concoct heaven-grade alchemical pills. How could they be successfully concocted if the alchemist was in a state of agitation? He really wanted to stop Ling Han so that he would not waste his heaven-grade ingredients. But there was no way he could do so. Every single alchemist had the right to be certified as a higher-level alchemist, and not even he was allowed to take that right away. The alchemy chamber was prepared, and as Ling Han strode over to it, a great commotion arose in the North Pill Pavilion. Someone was going to be certified as a heaven-grade alchemist. This was an absolutely inconceivable feat in the North region, because even though there have been heaven-grade alchemists from the North region in the past, every single one of them succeeded in breaking through and was certified in the Middle State and never once returned to the North region afterwards. Now, there was actually someone who intended to certify as a heaven-grade alchemist in the North region. Fuck, they definitely had to go and see that. Chapter 454, Opening the Furnace and Concocting Pills. Chapter 454. Opening the Furnace and Concocting Pills. Ling Han had indeed decided to certify as a heaven-grade alchemist on an impulse. An 18-year-old heaven-grade alchemist was too dazzling a presence. Furthermore, he had yet to build up his own power base. If some sect like the Winter Moon sect or the Beast Emperor sect secretly kidnapped and imprisoned him to force him to concoct alchemical pills, what was he to do? On the surface, there was indeed no one who would dare do anything damaging to a heaven-grade alchemist, but in secret After all, in this whole world, there are only 2 heaven-grade alchemists. Ling Han possessed the Black Tower, and it was indeed enough to allow him to protect himself. But if the secret of the Black Tower was leaked, he could possibly encounter even more trouble. Just look, hadn't the Thousand Corpse sect already taken note of him? However, for his father's sake, Ling Han chose to be rash. He definitely needed to obtain the 9-leaf black Ganoderma so that he could concoct the Restore Spirit pill. The problem now was, could he actually concoct heaven-grade alchemical pills? After all, he now only had a spiritual pedestal tier cultivation level, and in theory, the highest grade he could concoct would be earth-grade, mid-level pills. With the strange fire thrown into the mix, earth-grade high-level pills should be no problem, but heaven-grade, it was a matter of chance. He could only hope that small fire had been terribly trained enough in the Black Tower, and thus had a big power upgrade. Otherwise, there was really a chance he could fail. Losing face was not that important, but the important thing here would be that he would not be able to snatch back the 9-leaf black Ganoderma. Ling Han gathered his scattered thoughts and drew out a stalk of Spirit Heart Heaven spring bamboo from within the Black Tower. This was a spirit herb that could be used to concoct the most commonly seen return origin pill, which was used to replenish origin power. However, the Spring Heart Heaven spring bamboo was used to concoct a high-grade return origin pill. A 10-year-old herb could allow a spiritual infant tier cultivator to instantly recover 1/10 of his origin power. A 100-year-old one was effective for a deity transformation tier cultivator, whereas a 1,000-year-old herb could be used by a heaven tier cultivator. Ling Han obtained a 100-year-old Spirit Heart Heaven spring bamboo in the Devil's Sky mystery realm, which, after close to a year of growing in the Black Tower, had now reached 1,000 years old, and could now be used to concoct the highest grade return origin pill. An alchemical pill that was to be used by a heaven tier cultivator was naturally a heaven grade alchemical pill. Though heaven grade alchemical pills could also be categorized into low, mid, and high level pills, because the pill grade was too high, heaven grade low level pills were directly referred to as heaven grade. Heaven grade mid-level pills were called Saint grade, and heaven grade high-level pills were called Immortal grade. Saint grade alchemical pills were effective for shattering void tier cultivators, whereas Immortal grade pills truly did not belong to this world. In his last life, Ling Han could concoct out Saint grade alchemical pills, and had touched a bit on Immortal grade alchemical pills as well. He had even found some substitute ingredients and managed to concoct pseudo-immortal grade alchemical pills, which also proved that his talent in alchemy was unparalleled in both ancient and modern times and was extremely awesome. The name of Alchemy Emperor was not something that had come from mere praise, but had been obtained through genuine talent and skill. Those 2 heaven-grade alchemists of the middle state should be heaven-grade, low-level alchemists. A great lapse in the passing down of alchemical knowledge had absolutely no relation with how prosperous the environment was for martial arts, and there was no way they could become Saint grade. Though heaven grade return origin pill was the most common kind and most worthless heaven grade alchemical pill, no matter how ordinary or trashy it was still a heaven grade alchemical pill. It could not be concocted by any kind of earth grade alchemist, and would be more than enough for him to pass the certification. More importantly, he did not have any other heaven-grade ingredients. Ling Han began to sort the ingredients. The Spirit Heart Heaven spring bamboo was the main ingredient, but other supplementary ingredients were needed as well. His movements were natural and smooth, making all those alchemists who were observing him from outside dumbfounded. Sorting out ingredients could actually be done so elegantly and actually seemed so beautiful. Zhu Xian'er's heart throbbed loudly. Though she had been called the greatest beauty of the North region, and one of the strongest of the younger generation, if you were to ask her if she could actually speak with a heaven-grade alchemist, then that would be mere fantasy for her. In the whole Middle State, there were only 2 heaven-grade alchemists, and their status could be considered to be on par with shattering void-tier ultimate elites. Was she qualified to converse with an ultimate elite cultivator of the shattering void tier? Of course not. Thus, Tang Zuming's threat and temptation was extremely effective. If she wanted to ask those 2 heaven-grade alchemists to concoct alchemical pills, making her request through their younger descendants was the most effective method. Otherwise, Zhu Xian'er could only wait until she had developed to the level that even heaven-grade alchemists would have to give her some face-the-shattering void tier. Setting aside the question whether Zhu Xian'er would be able to advance to the shattering void tier, even if she could, when would that be? But if Ling Han could successfully become a heaven-grade alchemist, Zhu Xian'er's heart throbbed uncontrollably. She should be considered Ling Han's friend, right? And since they were friends, then helping her out should not be anything too difficult for him, right? In this moment, she hoped tremendously that Ling Han could succeed. Tang Zuming sneered. There were a total of 27 Earth-grade high-level alchemists in the Middle State, and they have been barraging the doorstep to become a heaven-grade alchemist for a whole 100 years, but ultimately, none managed to take this final step. What was the reason for that? That one step was much, much too hard to breach. An 18-year-old youngster wanted to succeed. That was really much too naive of him. However, he was still quite astonished by Ling Han's movements, because he too was a genius alchemist who was already a black-grade high-level alchemist in his mere 20s, which was proof enough of his extraordinary talent in alchemy. Ling Han's movements were much too practiced and made him feel inferior. He even had the thought to stealthily learn, but looking at how his movements seemed blurred to the eye, he had absolutely no idea where to begin stealthily learning from. At first, it was quite noisy, but an absolute silence had fallen over them all in this moment. They were all watching Ling Han quietly. The rhythm of his movements actually caused a powerful resonance to arise in all of them, as if something was about to gush out from within their bodies. After sorting the ingredients, Ling Han entered into the purification stage. Those amazing movements of his naturally caused his audience to be shocked and stunned, and quite a number even exclaimed in surprise, but they were quickly silenced by multiple disdainful looks from their companions. The most important stage was here, and that was the pill concoction stage. No matter how beautifully you sorted the ingredients, or how amazingly you had purified them, if you were not able to concoct the alchemical pill, then everything would be worthless. Ling Han sharpened his focus and calmed his emotions. Then he summoned the strange fire and thought, "Small fire, it's up to you now." Hung! A crimson-red flame suddenly arose. If one looked closely enough, there was actually a small spot of purple in the heart of the flame, making it appear out of the ordinary. Ling Han was surprised. Small fire was indeed very different from before. Compared to how it was early on, after small fire swallowed another strange fire, there would indeed be a great power upgrade. But the greater change should have originated from being upgraded by the Black Tower, making it really experience a true rebirth. Heaven-grade alchemical pill, there was hope. The flames roared fiercely, and the light of the fire shone brilliantly. No way to use such a powerful flame right from the very beginning. Isn't he afraid that he would lose control? That's right, the furnace could explode at any moment. Immediately, a great number of people began to shake their heads. Ling Han's skill in sorting out the ingredients and purifying them made them feel ashamed of their inferiority. But his skill in pill concoction, AI, it was really a bit poor. Such a person managed to become an Earth-grade alchemist too? probably mere boasting. Though many aged, serious-looking elders did not say a thing, their eyes revealed their disappointment. At first, they had really thought that Ling Han was slightly assured of his success based on how aggressive and confident he had been. They had never thought that it was a mere show of false bravado from him. AI, the latter, was only a youngster, so why had they, for some unknown reason, placed their faith in him? What a joke! The furnace fire burned fiercely, reaching all the way to ceiling, forcing Ling Han to have no choice but to activate his thunder battle armor to withstand such extreme heat. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, time passed extremely quickly. So much time has already passed. But why has the furnace not exploded yet? That's right, it's at least been 3 hours, so shouldn't it have long since exploded? Could it be that there is some hope for success? Impossible. I would guess that the ingredients he used were not heaven-grade in the first place, and he is simply concocting a false heaven-grade alchemical pill. Hey, he couldn't have been so reckless, could he? The spectators all discussed spiritedly, whereas Tang Zuming simply broke out into uproarious laughter. How could heaven-grade alchemical pills be so easily concocted? Ling Han must have failed early on, and was merely adamant on not admitting his defeat now. He had to be merely putting on a farce now, for the sake of his pride. Chapter 455. Appearance of the Pill Tribulation. Chapter 455. Appearance of the Pill Tribulation. Another 3 hours passed. Lord Gongyang, what are we to do? Someone asked Gongyang Tai-sun for guidance. What do you mean, what are we to do? Certification as a heaven-grade alchemist can last for 3 days and 3 nights. Only 6 hours have passed by now, and you're asking me what we are to do. Could it be that you think that I will step out to stop him? Gongyang Tai-sun huffed. That person smiled sheepishly as he thought. Doesn't everyone already know that Ling Han had already failed? So, what is the point of continuing to waste everyone's feelings? Let's go. There's nothing much to see here. That's right. Let's all just go back, embrace our wives, and sleep. You speak as if you actually have a wife. Believe it or not, I'll embrace your wife and sleep. The crowds quickly dispersed, and there were only a few servants left behind outside. A spoilt young master like Tang Zuming naturally was short of patience. Otherwise, with a great-grandfather that was a heaven-grade alchemist, he might have already advanced into earth-grade by now. He released a yawn and said, Gao Feng, stand guard here. I'm going to go back and sleep. Look closely. You must definitely not allow this brat to escape. The moment 3 days have passed, I want to personally kill him. Yes, young master. Zhuo Gaofeng replied respectfully. Tang Zuming once again snickered in Zhu Xian'er's direction. He was sure that this beauty would very soon concede to his will and obediently undress herself before pleasing him on the bed. He could not help but shudder in anticipation, feeling slightly impatient. In fact, he wanted very much to immediately force himself upon her right this very instant. There was no need to rush. This beautiful creature was destined to be served up on his plate. For spiritual pedestal tier cultivators, as long as they had not engaged in fierce battle, it would be no problem for them to endure a wait that could last over 10 days and all the way up to half a month. Thus, Zhu Xian'er and Zhuo Gaofeng both stood guard outside the alchemy chamber. Aside from the two of them, Elder Shi and Gongyang Tai-sun were there as well, and together with a number of earth-grade alchemists, there were in total about 10 people still waiting. 1 day passed, 2 days passed, and Ling Han was still endlessly embroiled in the pill concoction process. Furthermore, more and more people had once again returned to the alchemy chamber. Ling Han appeared not to have failed yet. They could clearly see that while Ling Han was concocting the alchemical pills, he drew out multiple patterns from the alchemy furnace, and after making slight adjustments, shot them back onto the furnace. Those were the patterns that belonged to the various ingredients within the alchemy furnace, and carried with them the essence of nature which formed natural patterns. Pill concoction involved merging these various patterns in a specific way and, ultimately, creating a shocking effect from them. However, the manipulation of these patterns that belong to the ingredients would only be used in the process of concocting a heaven-grade alchemical pill. When they saw how these patterns fluttered, as well as Ling Han's practiced beautiful movements, all the alchemists felt their hair stand on ends in their extreme shock. This youngster was really concocting a heaven-grade alchemical pill. Crap. Furthermore, the furnace had not yet exploded, even though 2 whole days had passed. Instead, the divinity and essence of the ingredients had been slowly extracted and revealed the most intrinsic patterns. This showed that Ling Han was still proceeding smoothly and successfully up till this point. This WSS really too astonishing. Could it be that he would really succeed? All of them were unsure. In alchemy, the last part was the hardest to finish. No one could be sure whether it was successful if it was not the very last moment. If there was a mistake at any one stage, it could lead to a fatal failure. Moreover, the manipulation of patterns in order to ensure that the ingredients could interact and resonate with one another was the very hardest step in this lengthy process. One mistake and the whole endeavor would be a loss. However, in Ling Han's case, he was extremely relaxed by this point. He was the alchemy emperor. What level had he been at in his last life? Saint grade. He had even concocted pseudo-immortal grade alchemical pills. So it would not be an exaggeration to consider him to be a pseudo-immortal grade alchemist. The only thing he lacked was the ability to raise the maximum heat level of his flames, and aside from this, there was naturally nothing else he had left to fear. He moved confidently, his 10 fingers moving as if he was strumming the strings of a qin one. So relaxed and smooth were his movements. One after another, patterns appeared, and he adjusted every single one of them before throwing them back into the alchemy furnace. The patterns corresponded to the changes in the medicinal effects of the contents of the alchemy furnace, and with his adjustment, they melded together and headed in the direction that he wanted them to go. Sometimes, Ling Han would even close his eyes, as if he had once again returned to his last life. Heaven-grade alchemical pills were a piece of cake, and saint-grade alchemical pills were no big issue, either. Considering the level that Ling Han had grasped alchemy in his last life, as long as he was given real immortal-grade alchemical pills, he might even be able to concoct immortal-grade alchemical pills. Hey, did I see wrongly? Why do I feel like I saw him close his eyes just now? I saw that too. Fuck, is this guy a freak or something? He can actually be so inattentive even in the midst of concocting a heaven-grade alchemical pill. The spectators all erupted into a shocked clamor. They had really been astonished by Ling Han's actions. Ling Han's movements became increasingly skillful. He knew every step like it was the back of his hand. His fingers seemed to have a spirit of their own and twisted the unique nature of each ingredient easily, moving in a relaxed and pleasurable manner. As the time limit for the 3 days neared, more and more patterns steamed out of the alchemy furnace. Merely a glance was enough to turn the faces of the earth-grade alchemists green. Yet Ling Han was absolutely unconcerned. The movements of his hands sped up correspondingly in an organized, amazingly calm manner. Tang Zuming had once again returned, and when he saw this scene, he could not help but wear a dark expression. Even if Ling Han failed in his next step, this kind of standard was really close to heaven grade. An 18-year-old quasi-heaven grade alchemist. That was too horrifying. Finally, Ling Han had forced back every single pattern into the alchemy furnace, and no other emerged. The time was also close to the end of the 3-day-long process. Suddenly a dark cloud appeared in the middle of what had been clear skies. There had been absolutely no warning, and within the cloud, lightning flashed closely together, making a loud crackling noise. It's said that when a heaven-grade alchemical pill has been successfully concocted, a thunder tribulation would befall it so as to prevent it from leaving the alchemy furnace. This means that Ling Han has really concocted heaven-grade alchemical pills? Otherwise, how could he have possibly drawn out a calamity of thunder? However, this is also the very hardest step. If the alchemical pills concocted are not up to standard, then they would be turned to ash by this thunder, tribulation. But if they were up to standard, they would absorb the power of heaven's Tao in it and truly come to possess heaven-grade effects. If a deity transformation tier cultivator swallowed a heaven-grade alchemical pill, even he would explode and die. There would be no way he could withstand the power of heaven's Tao. But will we be affected by the thunder tribulation too? All their expressions turned a bit dark. They had never before experienced it. They had never even witnessed one actually taking place. They had only heard of its occurrence through hearsay. Retreat! Retreat! Gongyang Tai Sun's expression changed drastically. As an Earth-grade mid-level alchemist, he was naturally aware that the moment a heaven-grade alchemical pill left the alchemy furnace, a thunder tribulation would be drawn out. That was not something to play around with. All of them hurriedly fled in all directions. Everyone was now sure by now that Ling Han was indeed concocting heaven-grade alchemical pills. Otherwise, there was no way he would have drawn out a thunder tribulation. Then, as long as the alchemical pill withstood it, Ling Han would be a genuine heaven-grade alchemist. Even if it did not manage to withstand the might of thunder, he was still qualified to be considered a quasi-heaven-grade alchemist. Elder Shi and Zhuo Gaofeng's faces turned slightly green, though one of them was in the spiritual infant tier while the other was in flower blossom tier. If they really opposed a heaven-grade alchemist at any instant, others could tear them apart into multiple pieces so small that not even bones remained. There was a great number of people who would beg a heaven-grade alchemist to concoct alchemical pills for them, and there was no shortage of ultimate elites like those in the heaven tier and the deity transformation tier. In front of these true elites, what could the spiritual infant tier count as? Even if there was a restriction in place to stop them, and the deity transformation tier cultivators would be greatly weakened if they made their way here, as long as Ling Han gave a holler, it was guaranteed that all the spiritual infant tier cultivators in the whole North region would obey him. He did not have to be a heaven-grade alchemist. Being a quasi-heaven-grade alchemist was enough. That was because spiritual infant tier cultivators had no need of heaven-grade alchemical pills anyways, as earth-grade alchemical pills would be more than enough. Chapter 456 Heaven-grade Alchemist Ling Han. Chapter 456 Heaven-grade Alchemist Ling Han. Tang Zuming could feel his facial muscles twitch madly too. He knew that even if Ling Han failed, there was definitely no one who would dare to touch a quasi-heaven-grade alchemist. Even if his great-grandfather was here, he would think highly of Ling Han as well. An 18-year-old quasi-heaven-grade alchemist. Was he still far off from becoming a true heaven-grade alchemist? Why was there such a freak in this world? How was anyone else supposed to live when he set such a high standard? Only Zhu Xian'er's beautiful eyes shone brightly. She knew that Ling Han possessed extraordinary talent in alchemy, but had never imagined that he would really be able to become a heaven-grade alchemist. This was a colossal, pleasant shock for her. Pum! Ling Han simply picked up the alchemy furnace and walked out. With a sweep of his eyes, he discovered an empty public square and hurriedly raced there. Everyone knew that he intended to have the alchemical pills withstand the calamity of thunder there, and thus gathered around it and stood firmly to watch. Ling Han reached his destination. His right hand suddenly opened the lid of the alchemy furnace, and 3 jade-green, immediately pills shot out of the furnace and fled in different directions, as if they had a life of their own. But it was precisely at this moment that the thunder tribulation took place, without any prior warning at all. Quang! 3 bolts of lightning struck at the same time. They struck the 3 alchemical pills, and pa, All 3 alchemical pills immediately fell down from midair. Ling Han moved swiftly and caught each of them. However, one of them had been directly turned into ash, and only 2 fell into his hands. This was the most ordinary return origin pill, and had thus attracted the most ordinary kind of thunder tribulation. 1 strike, and it was over. When Ling Han had concocted pseudo-immortal grade alchemical pills in his last life, he had actually drawn out a 9-colored divine lightning that almost spread to him even. When he recalled it, even at this moment, he could still feel his heart speed up quickly and turn ashen pale in terror. He gripped the 2 return origin pills in his hands and raised them high. The alchemical pills had not turned into ash. He had succeeded. Gods, an 18-year-old heaven-grade alchemist. Though no one knew what kind of alchemical pill Ling Han had concocted, knowing that these 2 pills were heaven-grade alchemical pills was enough for them. Respectful greetings, Grandmaster Ling. All the alchemists knelt. Even Gongyang Tai-sun was no exception, a fire flickering in his eyes. Gods, finally, a heaven-grade alchemist had emerged from the North region. Moreover, it was a record-breaking 18-year-old youngster. Who could compare to that kind of achievement at any time in history? Even that Ling Han, who had been acclaimed as the alchemy emperor 10,000 years ago, would have to admit defeat in face of such an outstanding feat. How strange, the 2 geniuses of alchemy from 2 different generations were actually both named Ling Han. What an astonishing coincidence! Elder Shi knelt. Zhuo Gaofeng hesitated slightly before he, too, knelt. Only Tang Zuming was shaking in fear. Gods, he had actually commanded someone to hunt down and kill a heaven-grade alchemist. Even if his great-grandfather was here, there was no way he could save him. He was done for. He was finished. He was so terrified that his knees were shaking. He wanted to flee back to the middle state, hide in the Tang residence, and never leave, but it was as if his feet weighed 10,000 pounds. He could not take a single step at all. Ling Han casually stored away the 2 return origin pills. He would not be able to sell them at all in the North region. He would have to wait until he went to the other 3 regions, or the Middle Sti and Sea. He strode towards Tang Zuming, scaring him so much that he shivered even more violently. At this moment, even if Ling Han struck him dead where he was standing, it was guaranteed that no one would dare to say a word in objection. In this whole world and era, the only people who would be able to exert some form of control over Ling Han would be the other 2 heaven-grade alchemists. However, they were both in the middle state, too far to be able to help. Pa! Tang Zuming knelt down and sobbed. Please spare me, Grandmaster Ling. I beg you to spare me, Grandmaster Ling. After tossing and turning restlessly, he could only come up with this phrase. He was truly so terrified that he was completely out of his wits. Ling Han rushed forth and immediately gave him a thrashing. This also meant that he had no intention to commit murder. Otherwise, why would he have gone to so much trouble? If he really wanted to kill Tang Zuming, he needed only wave his sword and it was done. However, this was possibly a descendant of his disciple, so he decided to educate him properly. Everyone else was struck dumb. Who would have imagined that a noble, prestigious, heaven-grade alchemist would actually be so violent? He had actually gone ahead and thrashed Tang Zuming in public openly. What was the difference between his actions and those of a common thug, then? The imposing image that Ling Han had just established collapsed instantly. Of course, his deterrent force as a heaven-grade alchemist did not lessen in the slightest. He was still in existence that they could all only gaze up at in admiration and reverence. When he was finally satisfied with his thrashing, Ling Han stopped and declared, "The 9-leaf black Ganoderma! Hand it over!" Tang Zuming was stunned at first. Then he realized that he was still alive. And he was no idiot. He had merely been scared stupid just now. Now that he thought about it, since Ling Han was willing to beat him up, that meant that Ling Han did not intend to kill him. He could not help but feel a great joy for getting a new lease of life. He quickly took out the 9-leaf black Ganoderma from his spatial ring and handed it over to Ling Han. He then said, "I'm sorry, Grandmaster Ling, because this is a necessary ingredient in one of the alchemical pills that my great-grandfather is in the midst of concocting. I had bought it over." "Hung, it's not rare for you to use your great-grandfather's name, is it?" Ling Han asked coldly. Tang Zuming's heart shook. He could hear the displeasure in Ling Han's voice and quickly assured, "I will definitely change my habits. I won't do it again." Ling Han humphed and shot out a finger which pressed down on Tang Zuming's dantian. "Grandmaster Ling, what did you do to me?" Tang Zuming asked hurriedly. He did not feel anything odd happen in his body, but absolutely did not believe that Ling Han would give him a tap for no reason. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "I just made you unable to be a man." "Ah!" Tang Zuming screeched shrilly. He was incredibly fond of womanly charms. So if he'd lost his ability as a man, then what was left for him to live for? "No!" he cried in incredible grief. "No, no, no. I want to be a man. I want to be a man." "Shut up." Ling Han gave him a slap. "It would not be difficult for you to return to being a man, but that would depend on your future performance." Tang Zuming nodded his head, repeatedly like pounding a stalk of scallion repeatedly, and said, "I will definitely perform well. I will definitely perform very well." Ling Han nodded and said, "Then we'll see." Tang Zuming could not help but be disappointed. He naturally hoped to immediately regain his ability as a man. But could he actually force Ling Han to release the restriction on him? He wanted to weep, but had no tears. If he had known this would happen, he should have fled back to the middle state 2 days ago. He would not have clashed with Ling Han, either. Who would have thought that Ling Han would actually put up such an elaborate pretense? He obviously had the genuine skill of heaven grade, yet humbly remained in the position of an earth grade low-level alchemist, causing him to kick such an extremely huge iron sheet. He was now feeling so horribly wronged. However, at this moment, he dared not to make the smallest complaint. The only thing he could do now was to stand seriously and obediently. Since Ling Han obtained the 9-leaf black Ganoderma, he was naturally in a very good mood. He said, "I'm leaving." Then he turned, planning to walk out of the North Pill Pavilion. "Grandmaster Ling." Innumerable alchemists gathered around him. Gods, they had never even seen a heaven-grade alchemist, so they naturally had to admire him for a few moments longer. Meanwhile, Elder Shi and Zhuo Gaofeng were both kneeling in front of Ling Han, asking for pardon respectively. "Grandmaster Ling, please forgive our previous lack in manners." Neither of them placed any importance on their pride or reputation, and directly began to slap themselves severely. There was nothing else they could do. This was a heaven-grade alchemist. In the whole world, there were only 3, and their status was on par with ultimate elites of the shattering void tier. Who would dare offend such an existence? Ling Han was irritated and said, "Don't follow me, I still have things to do. As for you two, head to my restaurant and work for a month. If you perform well, I will forget what has happened a few days ago. If you do not, hee. We will definitely perform well." Elder Shi and Zhuo Gaofeng declared simultaneously, their expressions filled with pleasant surprise. Chapter 457, Arrangements for Various Matters. Chapter 457, Arrangements for Various Matters. Dark Angel _ Forget not created another record. Previously, there were 2 members of the Prodigy role working in the restaurant, and this had already led to a very big commotion because those people on the Prodigy role were definitely going to advance to the Flower Blossom tier. Yet now, not only was there a strong elite of the Flower Blossom tier willingly here to work as a waiter, there was even a mighty elite of the Spiritual Infant tier who did not mind doing such menial tasks like serving food and drinks. That was the Spiritual Infant tier they were talking about here, an existence at the very apex of martial arts in the North region. Now, who would dare create trouble in Forget Not? Even the Thousand Corpse sect would have some reservations, right? Could they lose everything in one go without any rewards and suffer a double loss after trying to harm their foe? Not just the two of them. Tang Zuming had also docilely came here to work, and his identity was very soon Nona Black, grade high-level alchemist, and moreover, the direct descendant of one of the two heaven-grade alchemists of the central prefecture, Tang Zisher. But when they heard that information, everyone could not help but exclaim in their extreme shock. This was somewhat even more shocking and astonishing than a powerful elite of the spiritual infant tier working as a waiter. What kind of noble, prestigious status did the young master of the Tang clan possess? It could be claimed that even in the well-known 3 great sects and single valley of the North region, he could do as he liked. Even powerful spiritual infant tier cultivators would have to bow their heads in deference to him, but now he was obediently working as a waiter. Yet Ling Han was completely uninterested in all of this. He had initially planned to rush back to the Rain Country, but the 12 Heaven Mystery Realms were about to open very soon, and he had managed to obtain the key to the Sagittarius Palace Hall. If he missed this chance, then he would have to wait another 100 years. After much consideration, he decided to concoct the Restore Spirit pill first, then have someone send it back to the Rain Country so that Ling Dongxing could heal his spirit base. He would then make a trip home after he came out of the Mystery Realms. Furthermore, now that he had regained the status of a heaven-grade alchemist, he naturally should not waste it. He immediately wrote a letter which he sent back to the Winter Moon sect to request them to release his mother. Of course, he would not say that Yu Hongchang was his mother, to prevent some people like the Ao clan getting dangerous ideas to make use of Yu Hongchang to exert some control over him. He only requested them to release her in a forceful manner, and demanded for her to be brought to Extreme Yang City, where she would be sent to live temporarily in the North Pill Pavilion. He did not offer any reason at all. So what if he didn't? I am a heaven-grade alchemist, and I am really as willful as that, so what can you do about it? It would take about a month's time from the moment that the 12 Heaven Mystery Realms appeared out of thin air until the moment that others could officially enter. By now, more than a dozen days had passed, and after another dozen over days, it would be completely open. However, in these dozen over days, Ling Han was extremely vexed. All the alchemists in the North Pill Pavilion saw him as their idol, and every single one of them was a fanatic who came every single day to pay their respectful greetings. It was all right, even if they were not able to see him personally. They would definitely still kneel down outside and pay their respects. They already thought of Ling Han as the object of their faith and a totem for them to revere. With so many people coming to pay their respects, naturally, the news could not be kept secret forever. The residents of Extreme Yang City finally found out that the owner of Forget Not and Alchemist King Pavilion was actually a newly advanced heaven-grade alchemist. No wonder there were so many important people racing there to work, and no wonder that the Alchemist King Pavilion would make such a boast. Could a heaven-grade alchemist still not be claimed as a king? For Jiderong and Shui Gucheng, they no longer considered the matter of them working at Forget Not a disgrace. On the other hand, this had become a source of pride for them. Just take a look. The two of us were the first cultivators to work at Forget Not, and that was even sooner than any cultivator of the spiritual infant tier or the flower blossom tier. In terms of hierarchy, those two would have to address them as senior apprentice brothers. Ling Han was actually quite free. He had already concocted the Restore Spirit pill and especially requested Lu Jitong to run this errand. With an Earth-grade low-level alchemist by his side to take care of him, there would definitely be no problems in Ling Dongxing's recovery process. Gongyang Tai-sun even personally made a trip to the Winter Moon sect. With an Earth-grade, mid-level alchemist present, as well as the written decree of a heaven-grade alchemist, he did not believe that the Winter Moon sect would purposely delay matters and refuse to release his mother. He was spending every day studying the Tindu Heaven Star Array. By drawing parallels through inference, he felt that it should facilitate his sword skills. Young Master Han, Miss Zhu Xian requests an audience with you. Ling Han had just been deducing the Tao of the array in the courtyard when Zhu Wujiu knocked on the door and announced his guest in a low voice. Ling Han hesitated slightly, then said, "Let her come in." "Yes." Zhu Wujiu replied, then left. Actually, if it was any other person, he would definitely not come and inform Ling Han. However, Zhu Xian'er was the greatest beauty of the North region, and he truly hoped that she could become Ling Han's wife. Only the greatest beauty of the North region would be qualified to stand beside a man like Ling Han. After all. After a moment, a light knock sounded on the courtyard doors again, and two people entered. Zhu Xian'er, as well as Zhu Longxing. The Zhu Xian'er now had not even a little bit of arrogance left in her attitude. She could not help but bow her head and maintain a submissive posture, looking very well behaved. "Xian'er pays my respects to Grandmaster Ling." Zhu Xian'er lowered her body and paid her respects. Her white skirts spread out as she lowered into a bow, as if she was an exquisite fresh flower that was blooming. Zhu Longxing hurriedly bowed in respect as well, and said, "My respectful greetings, young Master Han." Ling Han raised his hand and asked, "What's the matter?" He did not have any time he could waste. "Grandmaster Ling, can you help Xian'er concoct the subduing tiger heaven fortune pill?" Zhu Xian'er directed a very hopeful look at Ling Han. "I can," Ling Han agreed quite quickly, "as long as you can get me the ingredients, and I'll offer you a friends-only price. A level 9 spirit tool should be enough as my fee, or 10 level 8 spirit tools would be acceptable too. However, in the case of level 7 spirit tools, I would like at least 1,000 of them." Zhu Xian'er's face had turned completely pale. Even if she was the greatest beauty of the North region, if she really sold herself, would she actually manage to get a level 9 spirit tool in exchange? "Haha, I was just joking. No matter what, we're friends, after all. So just get me the ingredients," Ling Han said with a grin. Zhu Xian'er breathed out in relief, but her face was still extremely troubled. Though the fee for pill concoction was waived, the subduing tiger heaven fortune pill needed a total of 3 heaven-grade ingredients, and they were not that much cheaper than a level 9 spirit tool. How could a mere spiritual pedestal tier cultivator like her get her hands on them? "Grandmaster Ling, you are a heaven-grade alchemist, so you should have some means to obtain those 3 main ingredients, right?" she probed. Ling Han humphed and said, "Have you been spoiled rotten by others? Do I have any kind of relationship with you? Why must I help you? You are indeed quite pretty, but that is all there is. Don't think all in this world are fools." With such a harsh rebuke from Ling Han, Zhu Xian'er could feel herself instantly tear up. She had never thought that being beautiful was something she should be happy about. If it wasn't for the fact that she possessed extraordinary talent in martial arts, she would definitely have long become Somoin's toy to be played around with as they liked. But in front of such a forceful young master like Tang Zuming, she felt very helpless, because the former could easily grip her weakness and could even use forceful means to obtain her body. Not everyone was as gentlemanly as Yao Huiyu. There was indeed no one who would dare to do anything to her in the North region, but the whole world did not merely consist of the North region. "Grandmaster Ling!" She looked at Ling Han miserably, her beautiful eyes delicate and sad. Even a heart of stone would melt for her. However, Ling Han's martial intent was even sturdier than iron. His heart did not soften in the slightest. He merely continued to stare coolly at this genius beauty. Zhu Xian'er gritted her teeth and said, "Xian'er knows what to do now." Then she actually turned around and left. Yet Ling Han was a little confused. What did she know? But who cares? Why haven't you left yet?" He swept a glance over Zhu Longxing. Zhu Longxing leaned close and said with a bootlicking expression, "He, brother-in-law." "Pooh!" Ling Han instantly spat out a mouthful of water all over his face. Chapter 458 Arriving at the Mysterious Valley. Chapter 458 Arriving at the Mysterious Valley. Dark Angel _ Cough! Cough! Ling Han erupted into an endless bout of coughing, looked at Zhu Longxing and asked, "Who are you calling brother-in-law?" "Hee, my sister is so beautiful, and brother-in-law, you are so brilliant and mighty. So who would my sister marry if not you? The two of you are definitely a match made in heaven, and there is no other who would be a better match." Zhu Longxing leaned closer, acting chummy. "Rubbish." Ling Han shot him a glare. Yet Zhu Longxing was not the slightest bit scared and was still all smiles as he said, "Brother-in-law, you haven't seen my sister's face. If you had, you would definitely fall in love with my sister. She's so beautiful that a single glance would be able to captivate you." Ling Han looked at him strangely. Was this guy Zhu Xian Er's younger brother, or someone trying to pimp her out? Thinking about it in this way, Zhu Xian Er was indeed quite pitiful. Aside from having to run all over the place for her master, who had suffered a Dao injury, she also had such a worrisome younger brother who was so determined to marry her off to a powerful, noble person in order to shelter him from the wind and rain. Ling Han was irritated and gave him a slight tap with his finger. "Brother-in-law, what did you do?" Zhu Longxing asked, confused. Ling Han smiled and said, "I made you temporarily lose your ability as a man." "What ability as a man?" At first, Zhu Longxing was clueless before he finally came to realization. Instantly, he was so terrified that he began to screech shrilly, "Brother-in-law, how could you do this to me? I am extremely loyal to you and have full intentions to marry my sister off to you." Ling Han clapped his shoulder and said, "As long as you stop calling me brother-in-law, I will consider releasing the seal on you." Brother-in-law Zhu Longxing was extremely determined in this matter. "You truly don't want to be a man?" Ling Han asked, surprised. "Brother-in-law, I will wait until you change your mind," Zhu Longxing declared with great confidence. He was not an idiot. On the contrary, he was a very smart young man. Who was Ling Han? He was merely 18 years old, yet had already become a heaven-grade alchemist, of which there were only 3 in this whole world, and was the greatest person in the entire North region. Furthermore, his cultivation level had reached the spiritual pedestal tier, and in the previous test for battle prowess prior to the Prodigy tournament, he had even delivered a blow with an estimated 20 stars of the spiritual infant tier battle prowess. A man with such genius in both alchemy and martial arts, how many millennia would pass for even one to appear? Was there any stronger backer than this one? The moment Zhu Longxing heard that Ling Han had become a heaven-grade alchemist, he was determined to have Ling Han as his brother-in-law. As long as he could become Ling Han's brother-in-law, who in this whole world would dare to touch a hair on his head? The brother-in-law of a heaven-grade alchemist. Wouldn't that be even more awesome than the sect master of the Winter Moon sect or the pavilion master of the North Pill Pavilion? As a result, he did not mind suffering a little bit now. He was extremely confident in his sister's charm and believed completely that she would definitely be able to move Ling Han. And once Ling Han became his brother-in-law, would he still have to worry about some seal on him not being released? By then, he would naturally return to a state of vigor and health, and who knows how many beautiful women would willingly fall into his arms. Tolerating for this one moment would lead to a lifetime of brilliance. It was the easiest choice for him to make. Zhu Longxing stuck close to Ling Han like he was a piece of sticky candy, and no matter what was done, he refused to be driven off, making Ling Han very vexed. He could kill him, but Zhu Longxing had not done anything bad. He had merely called Ling Han brother-in-law a few times, and that was not an insult. Ling Han sighed and asked, "What will make you stop calling me brother-in-law?" "Brother-in-law, just marry my sister. My sister is definitely the best woman in this whole world. Not only is she gentle and kind, she is also the greatest beauty in the world. Brother-in-law, marrying her is definitely not a loss, Zhu Longxing cajoled. Ling Han looked at Zhu Longxing, smiled, and said, "Whoever calls you a fool must definitely be a fool himself." As someone who had lived 2 lifetimes, he was naturally aware what kind of plans Zhu Longxing had in mind. Zhu Long smiled modestly, making sure his attitude was as humble as possible. No matter what, he would definitely not miss out on this wonderful match. On the second day, unexpectedly, Zhu Xian'er actually went to Forget Not and took the initiative to do menial tasks like serving dishes and wine. This immediately made Forget Not an even greater focus point of attention, especially when it was already the source of much commotion in the first place. The greatest beauty of the North region was actually here to work as a waitress as well. Forget Not, that was already crowded to bursting point in the first place, instantly experienced an upgrade in the length of the queues waiting outside. It could not be denied the attraction level of a beautiful woman instantly defeated any spiritual infant tier or flower blossom tier cultivator. At least, there had not been so many customers attracted by the spectacle of Elder Shi and Zhuo Gaofeng working as waiters. Ling Han was surprised. So this was the realization that Zhu Xian'er had come to be a waitress. He really could not comprehend the logic of women. There was no word to describe the charm of Zhu Xian'er. Merely 2 or 3 days had passed, and Zhu Wujiu, Qin Yi, and Guang Yuan had all become her solid supporters. Even Lu Yutong and Li Xichan had been won over, and they completely did not treat her like an outsider. There was no need to mention Zhu Longxing, of course. He was completely a self-proclaimed brother-in-law. His skin was thick enough that no arrow would be able to pierce through. By now, only Hunyou was in the same camp with Ling Han. This little girl had never had any fondness for Zhu Xian'er, and she was even more displeased at the sight of her now. She would always bare her little white teeth at the latter as if she wanted to pounce and take a bite out of her. The day that the 12 heaven mystery realms would open was getting nearer and nearer. Thus, Ling Han brought all the members of his group and set off. Zhu Xian'er was naturally traveling alongside them as well. She seemed to have inherited her younger brother's thick skin too, and did not feel that there was anything strange in this arrangement. The site where the 12 heaven mystery realms would open was located 10,000 miles east of Extreme Yang City. And taking Ling Han's speed into account, it was a trip of about 4 days. The group hired 2 carriages in total. The men would be in one, and the women would be in the other. Initially, Ling Han would definitely have sat with Lu Yutong and the others. But because there was Zhu Xian'er present this time, he chose to sit with Qin Yi and the other men because he would be able to use the Black Tower without Zhu Xian'er's knowledge. On their way there, it was inevitable that they would encounter robbers and thieves, but either one of Zhu Wujiu, Guang Yuan, or Qin Yi stepped out each time and the matter was resolved. They would easily thrash any band of thieves to utter absolute defeat. After 4 days, they arrived at the Marshall Gu Valley. By now, a great number of cultivators had arrived as well. They had set up tents outside the valley and were currently waiting for the mystery realms to open. This valley was very mysterious. It was hidden all year round by an endless fog. Anyone who stepped in would definitely lose all sense of direction, and thus be trapped within until their death. Only in the month prior to the day that the mystery realms opened would the fog that surrounded this place disappear. The entrance to the mystery realms was in the deepest parts of the valley. Thus, it was very simple to check whether the mystery realms had opened. One only needed send out some people to stand guard outside the valley's entrance and observe whether the fog had dispersed yet. Fairy Zhu. When they saw Zhu Xian'er disembark from the carriage, at least over 100 young men rushed over. Every one of them had eyes that shone brightly, looking very fanatical. The title of the greatest beauty of the North region was not something that had come from empty praises. Zhu Xian'er was obviously used to this kind of situation. She smoothly responded, both elegant and cool, ensuring that everyone would not feel that they were able to approach her, yet she would not cause anyone to feel bad. Her graceful bearing as a goddess was on full display. Ha ha ha! I have long heard that there is magnificent beauty in the North region. Indeed, it is a fully justified reputation. A young man strode out of the masses. He was only in his early 20s, with a tall height and long legs, as well as handsome and clean-cut features. He looked too dashing to be described by mere words. And what was more shocking was the fact that there was actually a pair of wings of light behind him that would spread out occasionally. With a light flap, the aura that emanated was extraordinarily overbearing. He strode over, and those on either side could not help but feel their spirits shake, and unable to stop themselves, knelt down. Chapter 459, East Region's Prodigy. Chapter 459, East Region's Prodigy. Reverie _ This person was like a god spirit that descended to earth, his presence shocking. He was clearly only a spiritual pedestal tier warrior, but as his martial intent spread, its deterrence power was almost equal to that of the flower blossom tier. Behind him, several beautiful female martial artists held their cheeks, their gazes full of stars as they couldn't help but scream, appearing infatuated. He took large strides, arriving before Zhu Xianer. The corner of his mouth quirked up, revealing a smile that would drive people crazy as he said, "Zhu Xianer, take off the veil. Let me see if you're qualified to be my bride." So handsome, so assertive. Wen Yijian, marry me. I am willing to be your bride. Quite a few female martial artists screamed, extremely fanatical. Zhu Xianer's pretty face turned cold. As her gaze swept by Ling Han, she said indifferently, "Xianer already regards Ling Han as master. As long as young Master Han agrees, Xianer will naturally take off the veil." In other words, it meant that if Ling Han disagreed, then you can take a hike. What? As those words were said, everyone was stirred up. The girls were naturally indignant that Zhu Xianer actually rejected such a super handsome man, and the men's eyes were red with envy. Regards Ling Han as master. What did that mean? Did you offer both your body and mind? In that moment, countless gazes that wished to kill all targeted Ling Han. If gazes were like swords, Ling Han would definitely have been slashed into shreds. And if gazes were like fire, Ling Han would definitely have been burned into ashes. Haha, you're that young masterling. The godlike youngster's gaze focused on Ling Han as he revealed a smile of disdain. I'm called Wen Yijian, and the future world's #1 sword. Haha, Middle State has some idiot, self-proclaimed world's second sword. Luckily, he didn't call himself the first sword, or else I'll definitely let him know what's called the way of the sword. So handsome. Hearing those bold words, many girls were smitten once again. Ling Han smiled indifferently and said, "Yao Hui, you certainly has the right to be called the world's second sword in the future. But as for you, I only see lowliness and whether or not you can become the world's lowliest. That'll depend on how hard you try." Wen Yijian's expression immediately turned grim. He said, "You dare insult me?" "Insult you? I don't think so. I've only told truth as it is." Ling Han shrugged his shoulders. Wen Yijian laughed boisterously, facing the sky, and said, "In this world, no one can insult me." "Oh, you really think you're something?" Ling Han said with disdain. He originally had no interest in paying attention to such a person with exploding confidence, but when Yijian asked for trouble, "Apologize to me. If I'm satisfied, I'll just cripple one of your arms," when Yijian said loftily. Ling Han uttered an "oh" and said, "Judging by your tone, you don't seem to be from the North region." "No kidding. How could North region possibly have such a genius like me? I am East region's #1 genius in the way of the sword," Wen Yijian said without a shred of modesty. As his gaze swept by, seeing many men reveal infuriated expressions, he couldn't help but sneer. "What, not convinced? Then bring it on. I can beat you till you guys are convinced, starting from you." As he said the last words, he stared at Ling Han again. You don't even have the right to fight with Master Ling. A white-clothed figure came in a flash. It was Shen Zhongcheng. I'll defeat you. White-robed Sword King. The 8th place on the prodigy roll. White-robed Sword King. Mess up that asshole from the East region. Many men began shouting, as when Yi Jian's arrogance already incited the public's anger. Of course, another person also became the public enemy, which obviously referred to Ling Han. However, quite a few people had already heard that Ling Han became a heaven-grade alchemist, and at least on the surface, who dared to pick a fight with one. When Yi Jian was somewhat astounded, looking at Ling Han as he said, "You're also some master. Don't you get frightened when I tell you." Ling Han smiled slightly. "Haha, what master could frighten me?" When Yi Jian said with disdain, "You're at most a high-level Earth-grade alchemist. Although in terms of your age segment, this is already very impressive." Ha 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 ha. The entire place was instantly filled with laughter. When Yi Jian was baffled by the laughs and said balefully, "Were my words that funny? Idiot, young Masterling is a heaven-grade alchemist." Zhu Wu Jiu yelled out, "Ha ha ha ha." This time, when Yi Jian burst into laughter, almost laughing to the point of tears. Wasn't this funny? Who didn't know that there were only 2 heaven-grade alchemists in all of the vast lands? But these 2 have diligently studied alchemy for countless years, so how could it possibly be the immature youngster before him became one as well? However, after he laughed for a while, he found that no one joined him, and all glanced at him as if looking at a fool, except for a few of the beauties that still had fanaticism in their gaze. Master Ling certainly is a heaven-grade alchemist, which the entire world reveres. An old man opened up. He was utmost Imperial Sect's Flower Blossom Tier elite, who specially escorted the sect's disciples in entering the mystery realm. Great Sorrow Sect's Flower Blossom Tier elite also said, "That's right, Masterling is North Region's most distinguished genius, like no other." Respects to Masterling. The Flower Blossom Tier warriors at the scene paid obeisance to Ling Han one after another. Alchemy and martial arts were not the same domain, but were linked in countless ways. If not for Ling Han's low cultivation, these Flower Blossom Tier warriors would have to kneel to pay their respects. Ling Han simply raised his hand, appearing composed. He'd seen these occasions many times in his previous life, so he naturally wouldn't be flustered. When Yi Jian was finally greatly shocked, one Flower Blossom Tier warrior could be muddle-headed, but it was definitely impossible that several hundreds of Flower Blossom Tier martial artists all had strokes. Hiss, the youngster before him, was truly a heaven-grade alchemist. Holy sh! That was way too young. Alchemists had status beyond the norm, and even if you had no requests for one, you definitely couldn't offend them, because offending an alchemist, especially a high-tier alchemist, meant many people would volunteer to stick up for the alchemist without the latter even asking. If word got out that when Yi Jian was so frivolous towards a heaven-grade alchemist, then would there still be a place for him in the entire world? When Yi Jian was proud but not stupid, so he immediately lowered his arrogant head and said, "This lowly one didn't recognize Masterling. I beg your pardon, Masterling." Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "I'm actually not some heaven-grade alchemist, just a small martial artist. Weren't you going to teach me a lesson? Come, come, come. Let's fight to our heart's content. Like hell, you think I'm stupid." No way when Yi Jian would believe that several hundred Flower Blossom Tier warriors would cooperate in acting with Ling Han, who was a mere spiritual pedestal tier. Was that possible? He laughed dryly and said, "Master Ling sure knows how to joke." He was also an extremely slick person, not stumped at all by Ling Han's words. "When Yi Jian come fight." Shen Zhongcheng, however, was full of fighting spirit. He was also a sword user, and seeing a sword expert, he couldn't help but want to spar a bit. When Yi Jian just kicked an iron plate and was very embarrassed, so he naturally would want to regain face. Snorting at once, he said, "Since you want to be defeated so badly, I'll fulfill your wish." Chapter 460, The Powerful Wen Yijian. Chapter 460, The Powerful Wen Yijian. Reverie _ Shin Zhongqing spoke no more superfluous words, directly thrusting his sword. He drove the sword towards Wen Yijian as if the thing driven wasn't a sword, but a mountain of swords, giving people a feeling of extreme heaviness. If pierced by this word, one would definitely be smashed into pieces. This was White-Robed Sword King's martial intent and belonged to his own way of the sword. Ling Han nodded inwardly. This younger generation already walked down a path that belonged to themselves. It was no wonder that it was said people on the prodigy roll could definitely become flower blossom tier warriors. Each one was certainly out of the ordinary. Wen Yijian's expression, however, was full of disdain, and he unconcernedly pointed with a finger as a powerful sword intent circulated and a flash of sword light flashed. Behind him 2 wings of light fluttered gently, making him seem like a god descending to earth. With the point of a finger, Shin Zhongcheng was immediately sent flying, and the long sword almost slipped out of his hand. Yet he caught it forcibly as blood splattered from his perlicue, and even the skin ruptured, looking extremely tragic. Everyone was greatly shocked. That was Shen Zhongcheng, the White-Robed Sword King, the 29th place on the prodigy roll last year and this year's top 10. Enough to represent those with the strongest battle prowess in North Region's younger generation. However, he was defeated in a single blow and by only a finger. The difference was way too great. Everyone knew that with the 4 regions, Middle State's martial arts level was the highest, and the North region was the lowest of the 4 regions, without even deity transformation tier elites. However, did the younger generation also had such a great difference? Clearly, when Yijian was also in the spiritual pedestal tier, and even if he was at the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, the gap shouldn't be so wide. "You're no good." Wen Yijian shook his head and said, "If you cultivate diligently till the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, becoming the same as me, then you would be barely qualified for me to use my sword. However, I'm truly a bit disappointed that this is your so-called genius on the prodigy roll in rank number 8? CK mocking crowd again. Brother Wen, then let me battle you." Yang Jun how walked out, battle intent burning in his gaze. When Yijian glanced at him once and said, "You have some strength and are about the same age and cultivation as me, which means you're satisfactorily gifted. However, with the same martial arts tier, that only represents that our power is close, but power is only a part of battle prowess. You mean, although our tiers are the same, your battle prowess is far above mine?" Yang how Jun said indifferently, but in his tone was an obvious fury. "That's only natural." Wen Yijian said, as if it was a matter of fact, "I sure want to see for myself." Yang Jun how laughed instead of being angered. He shook his hand and unleashed his long sword. This was a spirit tool, entirely crimson red and covered with vein-like lines. "I'll let you have 3 moves and defeat you in 1, Wen Yijian said loftily, sweeping his gaze across the surrounding people. Yang Jun how sneered, and no longer said superfluous words, simply pouring power into the long sword and beginning to activate his spirit tool. Wang on the blade, the vein-like lines lit up one after another as ceaseless raging flames surged out, instantly raising the surrounding temperature by a whole lot. However, the raging flames surged in front of him, forming a casing, protecting him within, as if a shield. A spirit tool that was both offensive and defensive. Fiery sea and raging tides, sort of violent winds that breaks through void. Yang Jun how shouted loudly, leaping out and bring a sea of flames with mighty momentum. Wen Yijian shifted his feet, evading swiftly. Shua, shua, Schwa. Yang Junhao attacked repeatedly, while Wen Yijian kept dodging. It was as if Yang Junhao had taken the upper hand. As expected of the first on the prodigy roll. This strength is too powerful. Defeat this arrogant disciple of the East region, and let him know that we North region aren't to be provoked. Everyone complimented one after another, while the girls that were crazy about Wen Yijian were extremely nervous, gripping their hands tightly in front of their chests and praying for Wen Yijian. 3 moves have passed, Wen Yijian said indifferently and shook his right hand as a sword appeared, very simply thrusting at Yang Junhao. This sword thrust broke through Yang Junhao's concentrated attacks, splitting the sea of fire and pierced the fire shield. Pa! This shield trembled once and shattered as the blade continued to thrust almost without a pause, and with a pu, Yang Junhao's right shoulder was penetrated. Wen Yijian withdrew his sword and said indifferently, "Merely so, truly disappoints me. Wen Yijian! Wen Yijian! Wen Yijian!" The girls who were extremely nervous earlier began to scream, appearing indescribably excited. The men's morale was low, and even more so full of disbelief. One strong as Yang Junhao was defeated in 1 move. Then even if Hunyao or Ling Han took the field, what could even be changed? At the last fight when Hunyao fought Yang Junhao, it was also a close fight. Although Hunyao didn't use her terrifying teeth, it still proved Yang Junhao's exceptional strength. Wen Yijian was too strong to the point of making people hopeless. Zhu Xian'er, after exploring the mystery realm, how about returning to East region with me? Wen Yijian asked Zhu Xian'er. Hiss, this guy actually dared to dig Masterling's people. Everyone was shocked. Seeing Wen Yijian yield at first, they thought he feared Ling Han, but now he openly invited Zhu Xian'er. He completely didn't care about Ling Han at all. Obviously, this guy certainly didn't want to come into a direct conflict with a heaven-grade alchemist, but he wasn't the least bit afraid of one. He certainly couldn't resist a heaven-grade alchemist head-on, but didn't need to be deliberately patient and accommodate him. Clearly, he didn't need Ling Han to refine pills. Austerity followed desirelessness. This guy was truly hard to see through, and was quite cunning. He admitted earlier that he didn't dare to exchange blows with Ling Han, and now, if Ling Han flipped out at him, wouldn't that tarnish Ling Han's image as a heaven-grade alchemist? If word got out, everyone would say that a dignified heaven-grade alchemist had no tolerance for others and bullied a spiritual pedestal tier relying on his position. Ling Han's gaze turned cold. He disliked being toyed with in the palm of others. Niao will beat the heck out of him. Hunyao jumped out and blocked Ling Han, walking towards Wen Yijian with her hands behind her back, and said, "Ugly monster, Niao will fight you. If you lose, take this woman away." She turned around and pointed at Zhu Xian'er. Everyone was dumbfounded. Why? Did losing mean taking away Zhu Xian'er? If so, then they also wanted to lose, wishing they had taken the field earlier. Wen Yijian laughed loudly and took out a stick of sugar-coated ha, handing it to Hunyao, and said, "Little girl, take it and eat it on the side." Hunyao began to drool and snorted. "You think food can tempt Niao? Then why are you drooling?" Wen Yijian laughed and said, "This little girl is quite interesting. Whose kid is it?" Everyone looked at him sympathetically. This little girl's bite was the battle prowess of 20 Stars Flower Blossom. Tyr, why don't you try? Xiao! Hunyao leapt out, firing a punch at Wen Yijian. What? Ling Han was slightly shocked. Hunyao broke through, and was at the spiritual pedestal tier. Chapter 461, Punishment. Chapter 461, Punishment. Reverie _ With Ling Han's former life's heaven tier perception, there were very few people he couldn't see through. Hunyao was one of them. Unknowingly, this little girl was already in the spiritual pedestal tier. So fast! Wen Yijian only saw a blur before his eyes, and Hunyo's small fist was already in front of him, giving him no chance to parry or dodge. However, he was a genius after all, and with a glare, 2 beams of light fired from his eyes, streaking towards Hunyo's small hand. Pum! You, P-dated, by Novelful. Calm with a sound, the 2 sword beams hit Hunyo's fist. The power behind them wasn't small, deflecting Hunyo's fist and scraping past her cheek. When Yi Jian's combat awareness was extremely strong, he immediately started counterattacking once the danger was resolved. With a finger as sword, he thrust it at Hunyo. Xiao! Hunyo's figure flashed, disappearing once again. When Yi Jian cried out "not good" in his thoughts. As expected, a wind blew against the back of his head as Hunyo's fired another punch. He hurriedly leaned forward, but all the black hair on his head was raised, as if turning into swords that stung at Hunyo. Pung! As the punch hit, several hundred strands of Yi Jian's hair instantly snapped, but traces of blood emerged on Hunyo's small hand from being stabbed by the hair swords. Hunaz, infuriated, firing her small fists repeatedly. Yi Jian controlled the hair swords to resist as he turned and was finally face to face with Hunyo. Pointing with a finger, instantly 9 flashes of sword chi winnowed and martial intent spread, emitting a terrifying, coercive presence. At this moment, he was like an emperor of the path of the sword, no one daring to look directly at him. Hunyo, however, was unafraid, turning her fist into claws and waving at those attacks of sword chi. Pooh! Piu! 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 The sword chi was all destroyed, but Hunyo's attacks were also to no avail. The few exchanges between the 2 were extremely fast, just like flashes of electricity, each move and style extremely critical. If either of them made a slight mistake, they would receive a heavy injury. A hush fell over the crowd. Even everyone's breathing was involuntarily held back. Only after a good while could the sounds of long ruff and long breathing be heard. Everyone was shocked inside. So it turned out these 2 people were strong to such a degree. No matter who else took the field, faced with Hunyo's attacks, they'd definitely be hit, and in Hunyo's position, faced with Yi Jian's counterattacks, they'd definitely suffer ruthless aftershock. However, the 2 tied, truly frightening. Yi Jian's was staring wide-eyed. This little girl was so young and she could already rival him. If they were the same age, then wouldn't Hunyo only need 1 hand to suppress him? Hunyo's viciousness erupted as she kept attacking continuously. Her petite figure leapt like lightning, making Yi Jian weary with parrying. However, he was certainly strong even under such circumstances. He still had power to return attacks, creating quite a bit of pressure for Hunyo. Ling Han was shocked as it was his first time seeing Hunyo fight so strenuously. It was not that Hunyo didn't think of using her terrifying teeth to decide the victory with 1 attack, but that she had no chance unleash an attack so closely. Yi Jian's battle prowess was also not to be underestimated. If Hunyo were to bite on Yi Jian, she would definitely be struck by Yi Jian's sword chi. The result of that would truly be hard to tell. Humph. Hunyo stopped. She had the absolute initiative, and the sugar-coated haw that was originally in Yi Jian's hand was snatched by her. At this moment, she peeled the sugar coating and began eating it deliciously. Ugly monster, you can take this ugly woman away. Yi Jian laughed instead and said, I really underestimated the people of the North region. Little girl, you can rival me, and after 20 years, I'll wait for you to come challenge me. With that said, he turned to leave. Hunyo cried out in anger. How could there be a person that was so untrustworthy? She clearly said that if he couldn't beat her, then he should take the ugly girl away. And yet he left just like that, too detestable. Hunyo's more impressive. She actually tied Yi Jian in a fight. Hee, truly interesting. The first of the prodigy role, Yang Junhao, was actually defeated in 1 move, but the 3rd-ranked Hunyo could suppress Yi Jian. Wonder if Yang Junhao's gone red yet. Everyone discussed spiritedly. Hunyo didn't disappoint them as expected. The stronger the opponent, the stronger she was, at last saving the face of North Region's martial arts. Although there were many people who could suppress when Yi Jian at the scene. But if a flower blossom tier warrior intervened, wouldn't that truly be saying that there was no one else in the North Region? If this flower blossom tier martial artist was of the young generation, then it wouldn't be a problem, proving the strength of North Region's martial arts. But if only one from the older generation could suppress him, then it would truly be humiliating. Ling Han looked at Zhu Xian'er and said, "Follow me." The two entered the already set-up tent, which blocked the crowd's gaze, making the crowd feel itch on the inside. A man and a woman alone. Would they do something embarrassing? The tent was large, not only having chairs and tables, but also beds. No one lacked a spatial ring and could bring all they wanted. Ling Han sat down and said, "When did I become your master?" Zhu Xian'er slowly fell to her knees and said, "Xian'er wants to do some things for Master Han." Ling Han laughed and said, "Being a maidservant at a tavern and following by my side, that's doing things for me? Please instruct me, Master Han. Xian'er will definitely try hard," Zhu Xian'er said seriously. Ling Han rolled his eyes. Since when did this girl become endearingly silly? He shook his head and said, "This doesn't feel good." He pointed at the table and said, "Go lie over there." Zhu Xian'er's pretty face turned red and then white. Did this guy's lust erupt, wanting to take her over here? She hurriedly said, "Master Ling, don't misunderstand. Xian'er truly wants to work for you." "I didn't misunderstand. You misunderstood." Ling Han took out a rattan. "I dislike those who don't listen the most, so I'm going to beat you." Zhu Xian'er walked over obediently to the side of the table, prostrating and sticking up her butt. She couldn't help but blush in this position. So embarrassing. Ling Han laughed mischievously. After this whipping, this girl wouldn't bother him anymore, right? "Pa!" He unhesitatingly lashed out, emitting a crisp sound. But this was only a normal rattan, so how could it possibly hurt Zhu Xian'er, who was a spiritual pedestal tier? "Pa, pa." Sounds are ceaseless. Zhu Xian'er's pretty face was getting more red and hot. She seemed to have understood something and couldn't help but blush. She could imagine how she looked right now. Her pert buttocks should be facing Ling Han, right? Too embarrassing, too shameful. Her consciousness was somewhat blurry, and she felt that her face was shockingly hot, as if it were about to burn. A feeling never felt before breeding within, sprawling and rising. Just when she was in a daze, she heard Hunyo say, "Ling Han, you're hitting too lightly. Let Nyo help you." Before she came back to her senses, her butt felt an unbearable pain, making her cry out involuntarily. She turned around abruptly and saw that Hunyo was biting down on her, but... Chapter 462. Entering the Mystery Realm. Chapter 462. Entering the Mystery Realm. Reverie _. What's going on? What's going on? Outside, the crowd was extremely impatient, jumping up and down and almost going crazy. They heard pa, pa, pa sounds earlier, and now this rapturous scream. What exactly was going on inside? It was impossible not to think wrongly. If it weren't for the fear of a heaven-grade alchemist's power and influence, someone would definitely have charged into the tent to see what was happening. After a while, the tent was opened, and Zhu Xian'er walked out. But without taking 2 steps, she reached towards her petite, but as if it was hurt. And watching her gait, it was clearly somewhat limp. It was over. Their goddess had been defiled. Beast. Ling Han felt it strange. The 12 Skies mystery realm was a mystery realm that belonged to the North region. So why did a genius from the East region come? As the time approached day by the day, more and more people came to the mountain valley. For example, the Winter Moon sect, the Beast Emperor sect, and the like came in groups 1 by 1, 10 people at a time. A great sect like the Winter Moon sect possessed several dozen entry quotas, and sects that were slightly lesser like the Great Sorrow sect and the Coldwater sect had a few to a dozen quotas. However, only these sects were qualified to receive entries, or either Leviathans like the Alchemist Society and Spirit Treasures Pavilion. However, the Alchemist Society didn't care at all, and the Spirit Treasures Pavilion gifted it to those on the prodigy roll. When the Winter Moon sect arrived, Ling Han saw Feng Yan. After 1 year, Feng Yan also advanced to the spiritual pedestal tier, even reaching the second layer. His advancement speed was somewhat shocking. It seemed his bloodline had already completely developed. Wild strength berserk apes were shattering void tier beings in the ancient times, and when the bloodline was awakened, it had great benefits on improving martial arts. Additionally, he also had a spiritual infant tier teacher who could bring him endless resources. Before the flower blossom tier, it was acceptable no matter how fast one's progression was. But if it was still so after the flower blossom tier, then it would truly be frightening. Feng Yan also saw Ling Han and revealed a complicated look, but it immediately turned resolute, with blistering killing intent. He obviously knew Ling Han had become a heaven-grade alchemist, and normally speaking, he would never have a chance for revenge in this lifetime. However, Ling Han rose too abruptly and hadn't gathered the power that heaven-grade alchemists should have, so he still had chance. Secretly killing Ling Han, especially in a mystery realm, who would know? This guy actually didn't attend the prodigy battle. Ling Han nodded inwardly and guessed that Feng Yan was at a key stage in cultivation, probably breaking through to the spiritual pedestal, tier the reason why he didn't make it in time. Everyone came to pay respects to Ling Han, who was a dignified, heaven-grade alchemist, and could be said to be the figure with the highest status in the North region at the moment. Even if the masters of the 3 greatest sects of the valley came, they would have to be respectful in front of Ling Han. However, this was North region, and the strongest were warriors of the spiritual infant tier. Even stronger elites couldn't come over without difficulty. Thus, for spiritual infant tier warriors, whether Ling Han was a heaven-grade alchemist or an earth-grade one really had no difference. This was called, when the cat was away, the mice would play on North region, was so. Spiritual infant tier warriors were the strongest in martial arts, just like shattering void tiers in the middle state, so they naturally didn't need to fear a heaven-grade alchemist. Of course, if several heaven tier martial artists or deity transformation tier elites, followed by Ling Han's side, the situation would obviously be different. Although the mist in the valley had already dispersed, no one dared to enter. It was rumored that before the mystery realm officially opened, the valley when the mist dispersed was greatly inauspicious. Those who entered would most likely be killed, so everyone would rather stay outside a while longer. After an entire month's time, everyone entered the valley one after another. The major forces in the North region jointly controlled this mystery realm, and no one could enter without an entry quota issued by them. On the way, Ling Han took Guang Yuan and Li Si-chan on another path. When the time came, he would store the 2 inside the Black Tower and enter the mystery realm using the secret key. However, he didn't want to be target for all. The inheritance of the 12 palaces was too overwhelming. Even Flower Blossom and spiritual infant tier cultivators would extend their hands while disregarding his heaven-grade tier alchemist identity. Moreover, contending over opportunities inside a historic site, no one had to give anyone face, and at the worst they could just kill him, and if they could do away with witnesses. So what if they did? This time there were certainly Flower Blossom tier warriors that entered, like Ao Feng of the Winter Moon sect. Flower Blossom tier elites that weren't 50 years of age could definitely be considered young, conforming with the entry conditions of the 12 heaven mystery realms. Moreover, the Beast Emperor sect, the Blood Flame Valley, and so on also had such geniuses who were highly ranked on the prodigy roll 20 years ago, therefore Flower Blossom tier warriors, or else it was quite normal to break through in the 80s. With Flower Blossom tier competitors around, Ling Han decided to be more low-key. Lu Yutong, Kenyi, and the others took one path and dragged Zhu Xian'er along, heading to the bottom of the valley where the Mystery Realm's entrance was, whereas Ling Han came to a thick forest inside the valley with Guang Yuan and Li Xichen, and seeing there was no one in the surroundings, he stored the two inside the Black Tower and took out the key of the Sagittarius Palace. The key immediately lit up as if it established a connection to a type of power in the mountain valley. A flash of brilliance wrapped around him, as his figure immediately disappeared. When he reappeared again, he was in an unfamiliar place. It was a barren land with round rocks everywhere, a field of gray. Is this a small world? Ling Han looked afar. In the ancient times, there were mighty cultivators who could separate a city and even a greater place from the world, overlapping with the current world and forming a mystery land, a very miraculous feat. Such heaven-defying handiwork. Ling Han definitely couldn't do it in his previous lifetime. Just as he was about to let Guang Yuan and Li Xichen out, he was startled because not far from him, someone was teleported inside. People were randomly teleported after entering the Mystery Realm, appearing in different places. That was a very fine beauty, her skin white and sparkling as if it was a high-grade jade. She was tall with long legs and her boss samample, extremely captivating. She was obviously somewhat at a loss, but very soon composed herself, and at the same time, she discovered Ling Han, revealing a vigilant expression. Fighting over treasures in mystery realms. Everyone was a hidden enemy. So what if it was a heaven-grade alchemist? In here, the most important thing was to protect oneself. The spiritual qi here was really abundant, updated by Bach's novel. Come, Ling Han retracted his gaze. After he advanced into the spiritual pedestal tier, each spiritual pedestal layer constructed consumed endless origin power, so even for him his cultivation progression speed now dropped to 3 months for increasing one layer. This actually wasn't slow. After 2 years, he would be past the spiritual pedestal tier. His base was so solid, and being invincible in the same tier, there naturally was a price to pay. However, cultivating in here, he only needed 2 months to increase by 1 layer. Unfortunately, 12 heaven mystery realms only opened for a few months at a time. He was now at the middle stage of first layer, the spiritual pedestal tier. Without some special occurrences, he would only be second layer spiritual pedestal tier when he leaves. Ling Han suddenly felt a shred of crisis and immediately held a sword in hand, standing still. The girl in the distance thought Ling Han harbored killing intent towards her, immediately turning to run. Pum! A strange scene appeared. A rock stood up, smashing its fist forward, and the girl instantly was mushed into blood and pulp. Chapter 463, Rock Spirit. Chapter 463, Rock Spirit. Reverie _. This was a golem. It shrunk its body earlier, as if an inanimate stone. But now it suddenly rioted, smashing a delicate flower-like beauty into pulp. The scene was somewhat tragic. The golem wasn't huge, only a meter or so tall. Its head and limbs swarmed out of its jagged body, which were also made of accumulated by pieces of rocks. Rock Spirit, Ling Han said lightly. Heaven and earth had spiritual power that could birth all kinds of living creatures, and several of which weren't completely made of flesh and blood. For example, Ents, a race that was formed after plants possessed wisdom. For example, strange fire, another type of living creature that, at its pinnacle, could turn into the shape of a human, such that even normal martial artists wouldn't be able to tell it was different from a true human. The one he faced now was a rock spirit. The living spirits of the 5 elements had some things in common. They felt no pain like normal living creatures and were very, very hard to kill. Strange fire didn't have a physical body and couldn't be hurt by gravity. Only water-type arts could restrain it. The special trait of a rock spirit was its scary defensive power, like Ling Han's rock cliff body. Although it was incomparable to rare metals of the same tier, it was still extremely tough. After mushing the girl, the rock spirit turned to face Ling Han. Despite having no facial features, it still gave Ling Han a feeling of being stared at. This place may be a holy land for cultivation, but it's also a dangerous place. Ling Han muttered, "However, if I can subdue a few rock spirits, then I could spread beans into soldiers, surely enough to give people a great surprise." The 1,000-corpse sect thirsted for the spatial spirit tool in his hand that could accommodate living things for the purpose of hiding a large army inside when they launched a surprise attack. The effect of it would definitely be shocking. In the time he was lost in thought, the golem charged over and fired a punch, momentous and heavy, breaking through the speed of sound. A visible void instantly formed behind the fist, with chaotic burst of the sonic boom. Ling Han laughed, also greeting with a punch, and said, "Think I'm scared of you. Let's see whose fist is harder." Pum! The two fists clashed as a shock wave instantly burst forth. The golem was sent flying, its right arm shattered. Ling Han was astounded. He didn't hold back in this punch, simply not using arts or fist chi, but it only shattered one of the golem's arm, yet not made the golem explode completely. It could be seen how powerful the golem was and how tough its physique was. Against the golem, there was no need to hold back, because the golem's shattered arm turned into infinitely small rocks that fell on the ground, but immediately began rolling as if it had its own life. When the rocks gathered underneath the golem's feet, the rocks fluttered and connected to the severed arm. In an instant, the golem's arm returned to how it was. Strange fire didn't have a physical body and wasn't hurt by brute force. On the other hand, the golem had a tough physique on top of its terrifying recovery power. The golem's head opened, as if cracking open a large mouth, unleashing a furious roar. It had never suffered such a great loss, having its arm shattered by someone else. Tongue, 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 it charged at Ling Han in large strides, and with each step, the ground trembled slightly, showing its terrifying mass. It fired another punch. "Can't beat you into submission." Ling Han smiled and also fired a punch. Pung! The golem's right arm was shattered again, and this time, Ling Han didn't wait for it to recover, charging up and firing a flurry of punches. The golem's body was very hard, not much different from rare metals of the same tier, but it still couldn't be mentioned in the same breath after all. Otherwise, it'd be Iron Man and not golem. The rock spirit was somewhat lacking in defense when compared with the gold spirit, but its recovery power was strong. After receiving a dozen punches, the golem was completely shattered into bits and pieces, spreading all over the ground. However, these small pieces of rock immediately began rolling and recombining. Ling Han didn't stop it, but when it was about to finish reconstructing, he fired a punch and shattered it into bits and pieces again. The golem began to reconstruct, but every time it was about to finish, Ling Han would break it up. After 5 consecutive times, it finally stopped reconstructing, and the several hundred pieces of shattered rocks began to wriggle one after another, turning into several hundred small golems. These golems synchronized and roared in anger. Instantly, the pieces of rocks that lay on the desolate field all stood up. They were all golems. S.H.T. Ling Han was somewhat surprised that he actually landed in the den of golems. Was this luck extremely terrible or extremely good? All the golems roared towards the sky, echoing one another. Ha! Ling Han laughed loudly. With this many golems, he could organize a powerful army. He waved his hand and said, "Quickly come into the bowl." Pung, pung, pung! There were at least 100 large golems charging towards Ling Han, and the shattered golem took advantage to reconstruct. The life force and recovery power of these type of spirits were truly a bit overbearing. Ling Han greeted them by firing punches wildly at these golems. His battle prowess was too terrifying, sending a golem flying with each punch, but these golems were unharmed, immediately charging right back. Hard to take care of. Just the right time to polish his fist techniques. Ling Han launched the war elephant fist, and 7 flashes of momentous chi surged, evolving into 8 ancient war elephants that rammed into those golems. He pulled no punches as his battle prowess immediately rocketed and the war elephants dominated, crushing into pieces any golem that was touched. However, this only suppressed the golems and couldn't destroy the golems' strong recovery power. They still reconstructed, entering the fray again. Ling Han considered storing them into the Black Tower, but every golem had its own consciousness. It would be the same after shattering their consciousness, be unable to store them in the Black Tower no matter what. It seemed like they needed a taste of power before they learned a lesson. Ling Han unleashed the Demon Birth Sword, with the destructive power of a 10th tier spirit tool. Would these golems still be able to recover after a strike of the sword? Once Demon Birth Sword was unleashed, the 10th tier spirit tool's vicious presence overflowed the area instantly. The golems lost some of their viciousness, beginning to hesitate. They were extremely vicious and merciless a moment ago, having no scruples at all, but now... "Haha, you guys also know fear," Ling Han said, laughing. However, these golems were naturally vicious after all. They immediately regained their vicious attitude, rushing towards Ling Han. Ling Han swung Demon Birth Sword, and instantly 9 flashes of sword chi surged, sweeping towards those golems. The golems weren't highly intelligent, but they had instincts. Each one of them avoided the Demon Birth Sword's blade. However, they couldn't completely avoid the sword chi. Pooh! Piu! Piu! Many golems were instantly struck by the sword chi and sliced into 2. This time, the golems reconstructed much slower. The sword chi was slashed out by a 10th tier spirit tool, possessing terrifying destructive power even with the golem's recovery speed. They couldn't reconstruct immediately. Ling Han suppressed all the golems once again with his own might, showing his invincibility in the spiritual pedestal tier. These golems retreated one after another and gathered together, piling up into a human pyramid. Seeing these golems continuously drilling into each other's bodies, Ling Han couldn't help but be astounded, blurting out, "Could it be that these golems were all broken up from a huge golem?" Chapter 464, The 10th Flash of Sword Chi. Chapter 464, The 10th Flash of Sword Chi. Reverie _ All the golems weren't very tall, about 1 meter or so, round and even a bit charmingly naive. However, they piled together and reached 10 meters height now. The massive physique no longer had any charm, but was instead filled with coercive power. In an instant, the massive golem finished its reconstruction, firing a punch at Ling Han. Pa! 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 The speed of the fist was too fast, tearing open the air and forming ripples as the sonic boom sounded repeatedly. An intense fighting spirit arose within Ling Han as he laughed loudly and said, "Come, come, come, let us fight 3,000 rounds." He greeted with a punch. Pum! 2 fists greatly different in size collided and emitted an earth-shakingly loud sound, instantly forming a shock wave that pushed forward in all directions. A mushroom cloud rose up from where the 2 were standing, rising up to several thousand meters high, and dust filled the air. It went to show the power of this clash. Half of Ling Han sunk into the mud, and on the massive golem's fist were several cracks, which were being repaired at an extremely fast speed. In this punch, the massive golem's power took the upper hand, whereas Ling Han was superior as far as hardness of fists was concerned. Ling Han nodded inwardly. The massive golem didn't break past the threshold of the flower blossom tier, but the several hundred golems all had the power of the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. How terrifying was it with all their power stacked together? If it weren't for the massive gap between the flower blossom tier and the spiritual pedestal tier, as a spiritual ocean tier, the golem's power would have long broken through the threshold of the spiritual pedestal tier. Ling Han raised his leg and walked out from the mud. At this time, the massive golem fired another punch, but this time the fist was wrapped in a gray brilliance, appearing somewhat worrisome. Martial intent. Ling Han muttered, but could the spirit of the 5 elements cultivate like normal living beings? It was obviously impossible. This should be an inborn ability, just like strange fire possessing terrifying temperature, burning all things. Ling Han circulated origin power and fired War Elephant Fist, battling the massive golem head-on. Hum, hum, hum. The two weren't in the flower blossom tier, but their battle prowess broke through the theoretical limit of the spiritual pedestal tier and could be called half-step flower blossom tier. Thus, their battle was also extremely fierce, and as the fists collided, their combined destructive power was shocking. Fortunately, this was wilderness, allowing them to battle to their heart's content. And Ling Han did. No spiritual pedestal tier warrior could possibly let him be so unbridled. And when encountering a flower blossom tier opponent, he would have to constantly think about how to stay alive and wouldn't be able to put all his spirit into the battle. Now it was different since this was truly an evenly matched battle. The massive golem's power was even slightly stronger than his, boasting even more surprising recovery power, allowing Ling Han to attack as much as he liked without having worry about killing his sparring partner because of using too much force. Hung, as he threw a punch, 7 flashes of fist chi were fired out. Haha, as expected, battles are the most direct and the fastest way to increase martial arts comprehension. Ling Han laughed loudly, but on second thought, it would be too wasteful to use such a rare opponent to polish fist techniques. Watch the sword. He unleashed the demon birth sword again and struck towards the massive golem. His grasp of the way of the sword was obviously higher than the fists, and compounded with the 10th tier spirit tool, the power was naturally even fiercer. Originally, the two were evenly matched, with Ling Han being behind ever so slightly, but now he immediately turned the tables, gaining quite an advantage. It was at least a 7-3 situation, and Ling Han held the 7. The massive golem let out a roar. If it were struck by sword chi, its recovery speed would slow down by 1-fold, and if it were sliced by the demon birth sword directly, then the recovery would slow down by 10-fold. The rock spirit probably didn't fear bodily pains, but no matter if it was demon birth sword or sword chi, both contained martial intent, which could be used to make assaults on the divine sense terrifying, making the massive golem immensely pained. If it had no divine sense, how could it be a living spirit? And if it had no divine sense, Ling Han would have long stored this guy in the Black Tower. However, the massive golem was truly tough and battled Ling Han nonstop, even though it was clearly at a disadvantage, exposing its viciousness. It suddenly opened its mouth to roar, and a sound wave swatted at Ling Han like a tsunami. This was a large-scale attack, so Ling Han couldn't dodge and could only take it head-on. Pooh! Ling Han groaned as blood oozed out from his nose and ears. The impact dug right into his body, affecting his relatively soft organs and brain, almost making him collapse right away. Oh man, if this were any other spiritual pedestal tier warrior, even one at the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, they would have been heavily injured from that roar, possibly even imploding and dying. You also have an ultimate move, huh? Ling Han laughed loudly, his fighting spirit soaring. If the golem was easily taken care of, then there wouldn't be much point in fighting. He charged up, swinging demon birth sword and raising up endless winds and clouds. The two continued to lash out at each other. Ling Han's released his fighting spirit to his heart's content, and although there were quite a few injuries on his body, he felt extremely at ease, as if something was about rush out from his body. He knew that it was the 10th flash of sword chi. From 9 to 10 was a fundamental change. The 10th flash of sword chi could condense into sword ray, so it was also exceptionally hard to cultivate. However, Ling Han forgot about the 10th flash of sword chi and about sword ray as well, only wishing to battle to his heart's content. This secretly coincided with the way of the heavens. Intentional pursuit simply equaled more haste and less speed. His action through inaction, following his heart, was the best path. He struck with his sword, and after 9 flashes of sword chi were fired out, a new flash of sword chi emerged. Although it was only a foot long, and disappeared on its own once it was fired, it was still a real 10th flash of sword chi. Ha! Ling Han felt even more satisfied, swinging demon birth sword. The 10th flash of sword chi soon stabilized and joined the other 9 flashes, bursting forth the power it should have. This was a fundamental change. From this point on, Ling Han could finally be called a true king amongst martial artists. Ling Han's battle prowess rose steeply and instantly suppressed the massive golems completely, striking the powerful rock spirit into continuous retreat without a chance of retaliation. The massive golem used his old trick and roared violently again, wanting to shock Ling Han with the sound waves. Break! Ling Han's eyes lit up. The demon birth sword struck as 10 flashes of sword chi flew out. Pooh! Piu! 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 The sound waves stormed over, but he sliced them into bits. The remaining waves were split into 2 and swept by his side, no longer being able to hurt him. Ha ha ha! The 10th flash of sword chi is powerful as expected. Ling Han laughed loudly, bold and unconstrained. The massive golem stopped its attacks, staring at Ling Han from afar. Not going to fight anymore? Gonna admit defeat? Ling Han said smilingly. He was suddenly startled, for he saw the massive golem's body undulate like it wasn't a golem, but something made of water. It was extremely fierce, and what came after was its presence, which was advancing in an extremely powerful direction. This golem is about to advance. Chapter 465, Rock Spirit Advances. Chapter 465, Rock Spirit Advances. Reverie under Sir. Hey, no way. Is it really good to play this way? Ling Han sighed. He'd finally had the complete advantage and cultivated out the 10th flash of sword Kyle was perfect. But suddenly his opponent cheated and no longer fought him on the same tier. Rising to the flower blossom tier, how could he handle this? Ling Han was very freakish, currently only at the first layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, but his battle prowess was already halfway into the flower blossom tier. Even if he advanced into the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, his battle prowess would merely become just a stronger halfway into the flower blossom tier. How could the boundary of mortals be so easily surpassed? Even Rain Emperor relied on the power of the nation to forcefully push halfway into the flower blossom tier, level strength to the full flower blossom tier. The power of the nation. Just how many people and martial artists did Rain Country have? Earlier, when the massive golem split into infinite small golems, it lay on the ground like an inanimate stone, probably absorbing the power of the earth and making its final efforts in breaking through to the flower blossom tier. Therefore, when he and the girl came, the golem was immediately alarmed because it was in the middle of a crucial period. The girl did notice and stepped on the rock, naturally making the golem feel danger and offhandedly smacking her to death. If someone were to poke the nose of a martial artist cultivating in seclusion, wouldn't the martial artist be infuriated to the point of wanting to kill someone? Currently, the massive golem couldn't beat Ling Han and could only forcefully begin its breakthrough. Once it advanced into the flower blossom tier, killing Ling Han would be as easy as the turn of a palm. This wasn't just about revenge, but also its survival. It had to take the chance. Ling Han wanted to stop the golem from taking this step, but after a bit of thought, he gave up on this thought. He intended to subdue this massive golem, so the stronger it was, the better. The golem could cheat, but so could he. Small Tower, can you intervene? Ling Han asked. This was a mystery realm and was its own small world. Small Tower immediately said, although this is a small world and I've absorbed some source power, it's still not enough to conceal the power fluctuations when intervening. Ling Han was instantly disappointed. After all that, small tower still couldn't be used. It seemed like he could only stop the massive golem from breaking through or turn around to run. However, if the Black Tower was unleashed and if its power isn't used, I can still suppress such presence fluctuations, Small Tower continued. Oh! Ling Han was moved. If the Black Tower was unleashed and the massive golem was lured in, then inside the Black Tower, wouldn't this golem have to listen obediently even if it was a shattering void tier creature, let alone a flower blossom tier one? He immediately made up his mind, allowing the massive golem to break through, thereby subduing a flower blossom tier rock spirit. Spirits of the 5 elements, each one possessed unusual abilities. The strange fire could support him in pill refinement. The rock spirit could nourish the land. The gold spirit could make weapons sharper and tougher. The wood spirit was the source of life and had surprising effects of healing. The water spirit could summon clouds and winds, relieving droughts. Ling Han waited silently for the massive golem's breakthrough. Since there was nothing to do, he summoned Guang Yuan and Li Si-chan out of the Black Tower, and the 3 began cultivating together. The spiritual qi was too dense in here, forming spirit qi like mist. Cultivating 1 day could equal cultivating 10 days on the outside. Ling Han and Guang Yuan were martial arts maniacs and immediately went in the zone. Though Li Si-chan focused on pill refining, it was necessary to cultivate. She didn't have a strange fire, and the level of alchemy was restricted by martial arts. Therefore, she very soon began to cultivate as well. They all took a medicinal pill supportive to cultivation, furthering the cultivation speed. Only when they used up their soul power did they stop, and at this time the massive golem was still breaking through. Rocks broke into pieces all over its body, as its body was actually shrinking. Ling Han could clearly see that it wasn't that the massive golem failed, but conversely, the golem was walking down the path firmly. Flower blossom tier creatures transcended the mortal body, and for the rock spirit, it was the same. It condensed the essence within its body and cast off useless rocks, developing towards a higher level of life. What's that large guy? Li Si-chan finally had the time to ask. Rock spirit, a rare rock of the world that attained wisdom and turned into a living being. Ling Han said simplistically. It seems to be undergoing some sort of change, Guang Yuan said. Yes. Ling Han nodded. It's charging into the flower blossom tier. I'm waiting for it to successfully break through, and then to subdue it. Pooh! Guang Yuan and Li Si-chan spurted out at the same time, feeling that Ling Han had gone crazy. The flower blossom tier. Weren't those 3 words enough? Below the flower blossom tier, all were powerless ants, and no matter how freakish Ling Han was, he couldn't possibly compare with a flower blossom tier being, unless he rose to the throne, allocating the power of the nation like the Rain Emperor did. Would the rock spirit show mercy because he was a heaven-grade alchemist? Obviously not. Young Master Han. Guang Yuan and Li Si-chan looked nervous all across their faces. No matter. Ling Han smiled slightly. He possessed the Black Tower, which was his greatest trump card. Guang Yuan and Li Si-chan obviously thought of it. Although they didn't know what exactly the Black Tower was, they simply knew that Ling Han could hide in that place of absolute safety in a desperate situation. After they finished cultivating, Guang Yuan and Li Si-chan returned to the Black Tower. The massive golem could finish its breakthrough at any time, so they didn't want to be flustered when that time came. As expected, after another 2 hours passed, the massive golem suddenly let out an explosive roar. The sound waves soared into the sky, ripping into the clouds with terrifyingly shocking momentum. Its height shrunk to a little over 30 centimeters, but it was still much taller than normal people. However, compared to its previous height of 10 feet, it could be called a shrunken version. The flower blossom tier. This rock spirit already cast off its mortal body and advanced into the tier that all living beings dreamed of. It was different, completely different. This massive golem's presence was like the ocean, and a pattern appeared on its torso. It seemed like a character, and also a bit like a pattern, impossible to differentiate. It was old and rustic, as if an ancient language that existed in the primitive times. The massive golem looked at Ling Han in a lofty manner. Although it didn't evolve eyes, its feet slowly left the ground, floating in midair. The flower blossom tier beings could fly. A chubby golem floating in midair. This scene was a bit funny. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Blockhead, come hit me!" At the same time, he sent a thought to Small Tower. "You can begin." Small Tower didn't respond and just directly unleashed the Black Tower. Whoa! A pitch-black tower appeared, only a few meters big at first, but it immediately enlarged, reaching several hundred meters in size. A door opened at the bottom and revealed an indistinct entrance. Looking from outside was a blur of chaos. Nothing could be clearly seen. The Black Tower was extremely plain, neither having the gold words of indestructible golden scroll floating, nor raising an ancient and primitive presence. It was ordinary as ordinary could be. Ling Han knew that Small Tower controlled the circulation of Black Tower's presence, or else, if it leaked out, it would attract the attention of powerful beings from the higher realm, directly breaking into this realm to seize the Black Tower. "Blockhead, come into the bowl, come into the tower." Chapter 466. Subduing the Rock Spirit. Chapter 466. Subduing the Rock Spirit. Reverie _ The massive golem went berserk. A puny being of the human race actually dared to provoke it time and time again, especially when it had advanced to the flower blossom tier, which was an increase on the level of life, surpassing Ling Han by countless times. If its intelligence was normal, then it would definitely have scruples about the Black Tower that suddenly appeared. However, the rock spirit acted based on instincts. It instinctively felt that the Black Tower was quite ordinary, so what did it have to fear? Xiao! It immediately soared through the sky as a terrifying presence swirled by. Even the ground was trembling. Ling Han's face turned pale and his skin rippled. This wasn't as simple as mental oppression. The flower blossom tier presence could be physicalized, especially the special type like the rock spirit. Birthed by heaven and earth, the oppressive power of it was too strong. Ling Han slowly retreated, arriving at the Black Tower's entrance. The massive golem soared over. With one punch, it was going to crush the human who dared to shatter its head and hands repeatedly. Ling Han retreated once more, and Xiao, his entire person, entered the Black Tower. The massive golem didn't hesitate and charged right in. Seeing that Ling Han wasn't far from it, its viciousness instantly erupted. It launched itself over, throwing a punch onto the top of Ling Han's head. It wanted to smash Ling Han into pulp. "Freeze!" Ling Han said lightly, and the massive golem's movements suddenly stopped. In the Black Tower, he was the dictator. At this time, Small Tower already turned Black Tower into a microscopic seed. Even unleashing the Black Tower and controlling the leaking of its presence was a burden for Small Tower. It would consume source power, which it naturally didn't want to waste. The massive golem was a bit baffled. Why could it suddenly not move? Its intelligence apparently wasn't enough to figure it out as it shook its head abruptly, as if racking its brains. Ling Han laughed loudly and swiped his finger, and the massive golem immediately turned upside down. The massive golem opened its mouth to roar, and a sound wave instantly stormed over. "Freeze again," Ling Han said lightly, and the sound wave stopped abruptly, freezing in midair as if time could be stopped. He walked over and casually kneaded the curved sound wave into a ball, and then pressed towards the massive golem. Pung! The sound wave's power erupted and instantly sent the golem flying, even blowing a dent in the massive being's chest. Now that the golem advanced into the flower blossom tier, the power of the sound waves it released naturally increased, and it was also kneaded together, exploding on one point, which was even scarier. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "Blockhead, you convinced yet?" The The massive golem got up. The shattered rocks immediately flew towards its chest as if it was made of water. Quickly recovering too, as it was not even an injury could be seen. It stared fiercely at Ling Han, and Xiao launched itself once again, attacking towards Ling Han. Ling Han casually moved his fingers. This powerful opponent, who could put up a fight against him at the spiritual pedestal tier, had no power to retaliate at all, even though it advanced into the flower blossom tier. The massive golem was truly tough as nails, no matter how Ling Han tormented it, shattering it into thousands of pieces and stopping it from recovering. It wouldn't surrender. Every time Ling Han released it, it would attack at Ling Han fiercely. Ling Han couldn't help but lose his patience. Just how long would this continue for? Let me. Small tower appeared and swayed gently. Pa! A scene that made Ling Han's eyes drop out appeared. The massive golem actually knelt down facing the small tower. It was clearly a golem, but Ling Han actually saw the sincerity on its face. What the heck? If he'd known small tower was so kick***, he'd have let it take the matter. Ling Han knew that a being birthed by the earth like the rock spirit had absolutely no fear of death, and for them, death was only returning to heaven and earth. They were proud because they were birthed by heaven and earth, standing high above and looking down on the masses. So no matter how Ling Han suppressed it, it would only incite the anger and unyieldingness of the rock spirit. However, Small Tower's level of life was far beyond the rock spirit's, as if born a king, so the rock spirit could only kneel upon seeing Small Tower. Small Tower trembled slightly and emitted wave after wave, while the rock spirit nodded repeatedly as if the two were communicating. After a while, the massive golem got up and walked obediently to Ling Han's side, rubbing Ling Han's shoulder with its head like a dog. The corner of Ling Han's mouth twitched. The wild and intractable large fellow earlier was obedient like a dog right now, making him somewhat unable to accept it. And Master! The golem telepathically sent a divine sense message. The rock spirit was the same as the fire spirit, unable to open its mouth to speak. But they didn't need to, since they could inherently use telepathic thoughts, crossing the language barrier. Ling Han laughed and said to Small Tower, "What did you say to it that made it so obedient?" "I told it that you're my master, so naturally it's master too," Small Tower said indifferently. "That easy." Ling Han sighed with all sorts of feelings. Black Tower was too kick***, subduing a flower blossom tier rock spirit that easily. If it were someone else, even if a shattering void tier warrior came, it would be useless. At most they could smash the rock spirit into bits and pieces, but not subdue it. "Master, hungry, eat stones." The massive golem sent Ling Han another thought. Crap, why'd he get another chowhound? Ling Han palmed his forehead. This big fellow shouldn't be as gluttonous as Hunyao, and should be like strange fire. Eating was a necessity to strengthen itself. Strange fires could devour other strange fires to advance itself, while rock spirits devoured other rock spirits. He immediately thought of heavenly luck stone, which was also a rare stone birthed by heaven and earth, but he hurriedly shook his head. This thing could foster a genius, and giving it to the rock spirit to devour would be too much of a waste. There were many rare stones in the world. Ling Han nodded and said, "Follow a boss like me. There'll definitely be rocks." The massive golem smiled simple-mindedly, foolish like a rash fellow. Ling Han looked at the golem and suddenly had an idea. He hurriedly said, "You can change your body as you wish." "Oh, right. First I'll have to give you a name. There's already Small Tower, and Small Fire, you'll be called Small Rock." The massive golem naturally wouldn't be against it, simply nodding its head and sending a thought of approval. Ling Han had it raise 36 pillars on top of its head. They were very short, only the length of a finger. The massive golem didn't know why, but simply did so obediently without asking. It was as if it had suddenly grown hair. It works. Ling Han sent it another thought. having it change the locations of the pillars and forming a mysterious pattern. It wasn't that Ling Han was doing it for fun. Earlier, he suddenly thought that since the rock spirit's body was extremely solid, only a bit inferior to rare metals of the same tier, would it work if he carved the heavenly thunder dipper formation on it? This was an endeavor, and if it worked, he would carve 6th-tier formations and 7th-tier formations on it in the future. Chapter 467, A Special Formation. Chapter 467, A Special Formation. Reverie _ Ling Han was a man of action, doing what he thought of. He immediately carved formation patterns on the massive golem's hair, and these 36 strands of hair were the formation eyes. It had been quite a few days since he received Tindu, Thunderstar Array. He had long figured out the formation patterns, but lacked the materials to form it. Now a large piece of material was placed in front of him, instantly making him eager to give it a try. He had already carved the formation patterns on rocks earlier, so it was now a piece of cake. After advancing into the spiritual pedestal tier, his divine sense also increased by a whole lot, so he could carve 3 formation patterns in one go now. After resting for 5 to 6 hours, he could carve 3 more formation patterns. Calculating in this way, he could carve 10 or so formation patterns in a day, and in less than 4 days, he created all 36 formation eyes. Inside the Black Tower, there wasn't the Tao of heaven and earth. Ling Han summoned the massive golem and said, "Unleash formation eyes." Tsang, 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 pillars rose from the top of the massive golem's head, forming a formation, and instantly the formation patterns lit up and gathered the power of heaven and earth as the entire formation became woven with white lightning. The massive golem fired a punch. Z, 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 the flashes of lightning were also fired out. Its prowess was impossible and terrifyingly shocking. Ha 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 ha. Ling Han guffawed, appearing extremely satisfied. This was truly a moving formation. He stroked his chin as he thought of the formation patterns on Yin Hong's body, forming an astounding defensive effect which blocked even Hunyu's attacks. This proved that the human body could also act as formation eyes, and his sudden idea was also inspired by this. I have already cultivated to iron sheet body, and the toughness of my physique is comparable to rare metals of the same tier. So I should also be able to tolerate the power of heaven and earth drawn in by the formation patterns, as long as the formations tier doesn't surpass my tier, Ling Han said pensively. If he could carve formation patterns like that of Ing Hong, his defensive power could increase another level. Having stayed here for 4 days, it's time to depart. Ling Han stored the massive golem inside the Black Tower. It was a lot easier to deal with now since the massive golem was loyal to him like a dog, so it naturally wouldn't resist his divine sense. Ling Han advanced with Guang Yuan and Li Xichan. They actually didn't know where to go, but anyway they'd move along first. This wasn't a real world. There were clouds covering the skies. There was also the difference of day and night, which was the change of light and dark, but there was neither a sun nor a moon. The 3 walked for a while, and the wilderness was already behind them. A vast plain appeared in front, and the carpet of grasses covered the insteps of their feet. Gentle winds breezed by, making them feel at ease. "Wait," Ling Han suddenly said. He walked forward a few steps and parted the grass with his feet, immediately showing bones with traces of blood. Guang Yuan also walked over. After examining for a while, he said, "This is a human collarbone." Ling Han nodded and said, "It should be of a martial artist who entered. But if the injury was man-made, it wouldn't possibly just leave a piece of bone. Moreover, by the looks of the cracks, it seemed to be forcefully gnawed off by sharp teeth." "Beasts," the 3 of them concluded at the same time. "Why wasn't there any before?" Li Xichan was somewhat puzzled. Ling Han pondered, then said, "The territory earlier was small rocks, so beasts didn't dare to intrude. From this, it can be confirmed that this beast or beast pack probably doesn't rival small rock." Li Si-chan and Guang Yuan didn't dare to be careless. The rock spirit was at the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier before, and only Ling Han could care less about it. One of them was at the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, and the other just entered the gushing spring tier, far from the rock spirit's previous power. They continued to advance, and after another stretch of road, a foul wind suddenly swept by. "A beast's den," Ling Han immediately said and leapt out. After a few leaps and landings, he found a barren land on the field of grass and dug a hole. The foul smell came from within. Seeming to hear Ling Han's voice, a beast wormed out of the hole. It was just 3 feet long, dusky all over and somewhat like a wolf, but its mouth was flat as if a duck's. Flat-mouthed, vicious mongoose. Ling Han revealed a smile. The leader of vicious mongooses could have king tier bloodline, which is greatly tonic. Even a normal vicious mongoose was in the spiritual ocean tier. Breeding it in the Black Tower to eat later on, it would definitely be tasty enough to make one drool. "Si-chan, you go back first," Ling Han said and waved at Li Si-chan, sending her into the Black Tower. "Master Han, then I'll go fight first." Guang Yuan shouted loudly and charged out. Although he was at the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, he advanced into the spiritual pedestal tier before and also received Ling Han's pointers. Learning War Elephant Fist, his battle prowess was quite out of the ordinary amongst spiritual ocean tier warriors. However, this was a beast den. Vicious mongoose wormed out one after another, and at least several dozen of them were at the spiritual ocean tier. The last few were at the spiritual pedestal tier and had a special divine light. On their foreheads was a pattern that emitted an ominous glare. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "Old Brother Guang, all the spiritual ocean tier beasts will be up to you, and I'll be responsible for the few spiritual pedestal tier ones. But don't you kill them. These will be our delicious meals afterwards." "Master Han, this request is somewhat high." Guang Yuan launched attacks while complaining to Ling Han. There were at least 4 vicious mongooses that reached the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. It was somewhat difficult for him to win, let alone subdue them without hurting them. Ling Han laughed and said, "Can't do it." "I'll try my best." Guang Yuan clenched his teeth and raised both fists, attacking the vicious mongooses. The few spiritual pedestal tier vicious mongooses wanted to go up to support, but Ling Han blocked them. "Your opponent is me," Ling Han said smilingly and casually threw a few punches. Pung, pung, pung. These vicious mongoose were beaten down. Within the spiritual pedestal tier, there really were very few existences that could fight against Ling Han. He stored these vicious mongooses inside the Black Tower, then watched the battle between Guang Yuan and the other vicious mongooses. He was slightly startled, feeling a shred of a dangerous presence, and couldn't help but turn around, noticing an old vicious mongoose wormed out the hole. The edges of its hair had already turned grayish-white, but it emitted a presence that made Ling Han not dare to be careless. As expected, a king tier. Ling Han's eyes lit up. This was an old, vicious mongoose at the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. Despite its apparent strength, possessing king tier bloodline made it different. Its battle prowess far surpassed the normal 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. However, it was a king against a king. Ling Han naturally wouldn't be at all frightened, smiling as he said, "Old Brother Guang, you're just about to charge into the spiritual pedestal tier once again. This king tier beast just happens to be able to aid you in making this step." "Much obliged, Master Han." Guang Yuan was exalted. Charging into a great tier naturally needed the support of a huge amount of energy, or else one could only accumulate through time and then form an explosive burst, charging through in one go. However, this took a lot of time, and second, it might not succeed. However, a king tier beast would make it different. The blood and flesh essence were like treasured medicine and could definitely provide enough energy support.